Later this year, we're going to be installing, I believe it's 1,700 feet of new water main on Maple Street, $1.3 million. Again, that was proposed originally in 1980. We are going to be working with Orange County DPW on the Main Street Bridge replacement. We're going to be relocating one of our water mains from out of the creek and putting it on the bridge. In 2022, we spent $500,000 on replacing 1,000 feet of water main that originally on Mill Street broke back in 2005, and we finally got it fixed 17 years later. We've been able to do that because we're no longer reactive, we've become proactive. Because we've been able to become more efficient and reinvest our additional revenue generated, we've been able to do it with very little bonding. Although I think our engineers and we've got to, over the next 5 years, I think, we have several $1 million, probably $8 million, roughly $8 million worth of improvements that we need to take care of up in the dams, the reservoirs, some more improvements at the wells for emerging contaminants. We're in a good place. We got to keep the cooperation going, and we have to remain proactive, and we have to learn to think outside the box and not just have the mindset, well, we've always done it this way. Let's look at different ways of doing it. Real quick, where is my notes? People have asked about our local water committee and what we've been talking about.
Mike, can you recognize the members so people know?
Yep, we have Eric Denega.
Raise your hand, Eric.
He's a village resident. He's also the Orange County Commissioner of DPW. Carla Castilla, she is the town resident representative. She's also on the Cornwall Conservation Council. And Councilman Tim McCarty, he's the town board representative. And Deputy Mayor Jim Kane's the village board representative. We began meeting in December of 22. We took a tour of all the facilities. Since then, we met 14 times, and usually on Fridays from 8 to 9:30 a.m. We met with the village's engineering team, legal team, as well as representatives from the health department to gather information. Things that we've discussed: water rates. We discussed that at length. We all agree that the current rate structure is in need of modernization that encourages conservation while also providing an adequate revenue stream. And it's got to be the most fair and equitable manner possible for all of our users. We discussed the need for an IMA. It's our hope that this first IMA will become somewhat of a living document, and it can be continued to be developed to include other agreements, such as when we replace water mains in the town, we have to get another IMA for that, and there's costs associated with that. We talked about private water lines and the effect that has on the property owners. A lot of the new property owners don't understand that they're responsible for the maintenance of the property water lines. We're talking about the process on how that would become a village-owned and maintained water line. We discussed regulatory updates and the challenges that the water system is facing currently as well as on the horizon. Everybody has heard about PFAS in the water. They're working on that in drinking water, but it's already been announced that wastewater is next, and you're going to have to find treatment at the wastewater plants for that. Water sales, we discussed that, and the committee feels that the village should continue to explore this possibility, but not enter into any agreements until a full cost and benefit analysis is completed prior to any potential contract. But we do see the potential revenue stream that could provide for the maintenance, but we also recognize the additional burden that it could place on the system and the community. We reviewed the draft water master plan, and we've provided comments to the engineers, and we expect to have the final draft back to us sometime next month. That's it.
Thank you, Michael. So I said earlier that we were gonna do public comment at the beginning in lieu of at the end, but since it is on the agenda at the end, and I don't wanna cheat people that come late figuring that they'd have an opportunity to speak, I'll entertain public comment now, and we'll also have public comment at the end. So if you wish to speak, there's a list back there. Can somebody grab that list and, thank you, sir. And let me just have that. All right. So I'll ask you if you want to speak now. If you want to hold it till the end, there'll be an opportunity at the end too. Mr. Phil Cameron. Yes, sir. If you'll just step up to the podium, sir, just state your name, your address, and then if you could just try to keep it to 3 minutes so we can give everybody the opportunity to speak.
It won't take me that long.
All right, sir.
Basically, forgive me for coming late to this whole issue. I'm here primarily just to address the issue of water rates. I've understood that the Village of Cornwall and Hudson and Cornwall will be charged a different rate for their usage of water. And I feel that that's very divisive. My family has had a residence here at 62 Duncan Avenue in Cornwall and Hudson since 1953. And before the centralization of the school systems, all right, we were two separate municipalities, and we were very separate. All right, there was Cornwall and Hudson, and there was Cornwall, and God help you if you cross the line. All right, people felt they were they identified with one municipality or the other. Once the school district came into existence and centralized, we all looked at each other and said, we're all residents of Cornwall. And I feel therefore that if you start dividing the two towns again, or the two villages in the municipalities into separate groups, charging one group for one rate and another group for another rate, you're going to end up dividing the community again. And I don't feel that's healthy for Cornwall. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. We're going to address that when we get to the water rates piece, but thank you for your points. Well said, sir. Next is Toya and Taylor Stovall, 227. I'm sorry? You're going to hold to the end? You got it. All right. Toya Dubin.
I'll hold to the end also, please.
Okay, you got it. Deirdre Leahy.
Here, I'll hold to the end.
Did I pronounce your last name right? Leahy?
Like, yeah.
Leahy. Okay, you're going to hold to the end. And Mr. Brunelli.
I'm gonna hold to the end.
You're gonna hold to the end. Okay, we'll keep this, put this aside. All right. So, moving into the matters that we're gonna do in order. The first thing is the IMA. And I think it's important tonight because I think there's been a lot of things that have been said either on social media or in the Cornwall local that are inaccurate and untrue. And I think tonight, the point of this is also to provide the facts. We have some charts and things that we're going to put up on the board where it's appropriate to make the case and to share some details into our research. How did we get here? Well, the village started in 1884 and in 1885 started a water system. In 1895, the village, and to Mr. Cameron's point, at that time we were the lower village and the town was actually the upper village, began delivering clean, drinkable water to the town. 1895, 129 years ago. When the rates were set, they were done haphazardly. There's no rhyme or reason to them. We've gone back and researched it. It wasn't until 1974 that Mayor Donahue, who was a local veterinarian here, took care of our dog, my family dog, back in the late 60s, decided to call a special meeting. He called a special meeting, and I want to read this in full because some of this has been abridged and parts of it have been quoted publicly, but I want to read it in full. Quote, in order that the taxpayers of the Village of Cornwall should not be penalized for higher assessments on the water facilities that are located in the town of Cornwall, the Water Committee recommends raising the water rates for those users outside the corporate limits of the Village of Cornwall to 80% in excess of present village rates. and an increase of hydrant rental from $55 to $100 per year per hydrant. 5-0 vote, Mayor Donahue, Trustee Farnsworth, Trustee Caston, Trustee Trainer, and Trustee Brazel. Okay, it wasn't until 1975 that the water rates were set at plus 80%. I think the former supervisor, Mr. Randazzo, was actually on the village board at that time between 78 and 1981 when the village board decided to make that differential 80%. To Mr. Cameron's point, why is there a difference? Why? We're all one community. Well, here's the reasons. We set up an IMA a couple of weeks ago, and originally the plan was to do it at this meeting. I'm glad that we elected to do it prior to this because there's so many things that are polarizing and potentially controversial. I thought taking care of that beforehand, because it was such an anodyne, benign document to get us started, was the right way to do it. The town, as Supervisor Wojciechowski pointed out, entered into an IMA with the village and updated it in 1965 and 1967. These are the only documents related to an agreement, but the town has one for sewer. The village doesn't have one with the town for water until recent. Now, I've heard people say, well, it's just for grants, and you're not getting anything in exchange. I'm going to explain why the rates are different. First of all, the purpose of the IMA is ultimately to be built into something more comprehensive and to look at rates. Rates will never be equal. They can never be equal. Can the gap be closed? Yes, and we're going to show you how we think we can do that tonight. But there cannot be parity. Parity will not exist here, and these are the reasons why. Funding. In the eyes of the federal and state government agencies, the village is the sole owner of the water system. We own all the infrastructure in the town. The town controls the sewer system, but we own the infrastructure for the sewer in the village. The town treats the sewage for us and gets rid of it, but we own and maintain the infrastructure. The town does not own or maintain the water infrastructure. The health department. During the local water committee meetings held over the past year, it was learned that the health department had no record of an IMA between the village and the town and the Cornwall Water District. The health department had contacted the water department requesting a copy of an IMA, which it said we should have had on file. Number 3, the New York State DEC, the Department of Environmental Conservation. Recently, the village was accepted into the New York State Department of Conservation Source Water Protection Program that provides technical assistance to water suppliers. One of the first documents that were requested from them was this, an IMA that said that we are in an agreement with the town to provide water to them. We did not have one. System improvements. Over the past 4 years, the village has made improvements to its water treatment facilities in the town, as well as the entire distribution system. The cost of these improvements have been approximately $2.6 million. In order to complete these improvements, separate IMAs had to be created on 3 different occasions for the work to be completed. There were legal bills incurred on behalf of the town and village. Town residents, however, paid the town's legal fees, and as users of the Cornwall water system, they also paid the legal fees for the village. This makes no sense. We decided to put this IMA together and keep it as sanitized as possible. Don't discuss water rates, don't discuss water sales, don't discuss anything that people might have strong opinions one way or the other on. It's a 2-page document. And when I heard some of the fear mongering about what the village was trying to do, here's what the village is trying to do. By code, 1980 code, by the way, section 165-6 usage charges. The charges for the village water shall be established by the village board. Second, the charges for customers outside the village of Cornwall and Hudson shall be 80% higher than those charged within the village. Okay. If you now go to the water rates and what we charge people, Mr. Cameron, currently there is a disparity. Village users pay $12 per 1,000 gallons. Town users, or anyone outside of the village, pays $16. That is a 33% differential. Well, Jimmy, how did we get there? The code here specifically states that it's an 80% differential. Well, in 1980, when this went into effect, it was 80%. It stayed at 80% until 1989. And in 1989, there was an increase to the village's water rates, which brought them to $2.69 per 1,000 gallons and the towns held fast at $4.81 per thousand gallons. It stayed at 79% until 2004. In 2004, the village rate was increased to $6.33 per thousand gallons, and the town's was 10.77%. That lowered the differential to 70% counter to code. Let me finish. Now it stays the same until 2017. In 2017, the differential was changed from 70% differential to 52%. It didn't happen by raising town water rates, it happened by raising village water rates. That happened again in 2018 and 2019 when it was again lowered, the differential, by raising the village's rates and slightly upticking the towns. Now, let me give you the numbers here on how this worked. So, in 2017 and 2018, I pulled the minutes from the meeting. So, what was decided then was that the rates for village residents, and there was no hue and cry then, nobody showed up with pitchforks and torches when we raised village water rates $1 per thousand gallons, there will be no increase in rates for town residents. The next year, 2018, 2019, Mayor Coyne made a motion to set the 2018-2019 rates for water, sewage, and garbage as follows. The Town of Cornwall water rate will increase by 44 cents to $15 even. However, the Village of Cornwall and Hudson water rate will increase by $1.45 to $11 per thousand gallons, bringing us to the current 33% differential. Is 33% right? I don't know. That's why we set up a water committee, and you should have seen the hysteria when I said we were going to set up a water committee and include the town, something that has never been done because the town doesn't vote on water rates. The village board does as the water committee, but we want to include the town. Is 80% right? Maybe, maybe not. The money that we've lost, when I say we've lost, the money that not charging plus 80% from 1989 until now, $5.2 million. Take a look in the front here where the attorneys are seated. Look at the big cast iron pipe there, 1895. Look at the 1927 pipe, and then the two sections of a 1955 pipe. We are putting Band-Aids on sucking chest wounds. Every week our guys, and we have a great department, are out there patching and repairing. You don't see it, it's under the ground. But I do, and I know it's happening. So as we look at this and we think, man, if we just kept the rates at what they're supposed to be by code that was codified in 1980's village board, if we kept it at that, what could I do with $5.2 million to reinvest back into the Cornwall water system, not the village water system, but for the greater Cornwall area? So I look at this and I then reached out to, and he was mentioned in my view today, to Mayor Coyne, my predecessor. And I said to Mayor Coyne, I just need to know what the thought process was on why we changed these rates. And Mayor Coyne sent me an email back and said, well, at the time I was getting a lot of heat about the fact that the town was paying a higher rate for water than the village, so we changed the rates. Didn't lower the town rates, raised the village rates. Now, as we move into the next part of this, which is going to be the property tax exemptions, and what we've talked about potentially in raising town rates 92 cents, there's a lot of factors in that. And I want to thank my colleague here, Josh Wojciechowski, because when people say, well, we didn't know about this or this is coming out of the blue, he and I have had a constant conversations between our boards in regards to what we're looking to do. What we're trying to do is find something fair. I don't know what those numbers are. I don't know what those differentials should be, but because of the reasons, and here are the reasons. God forbid, tomorrow, we have a catastrophic systems failure with our water system, right? We have a fund balance right now, $1.6 million in the water system fund, which we all benefit from. That's our rainy day fund. We also have money set aside for capital improvements. But God forbid a catastrophic systems failure on one of the 16 critical infrastructure sectors, which the water system is. What do we do to have to take care of that? Well, the village is going to have to handle that. The town isn't. If the water system becomes insolvent, right, and goes away, we decide not to deliver water anymore. I have people out on pensions from the water department. Guess what? Town residents aren't going to be on the hook for that. The village will be. The village has liability, and I think the supervisor touched on that in his opening remarks. We have liability, which means we will never get to equal rates. It's impossible to do that while we own the infrastructure and while we are exposed to the liability. However, should we be talking about creating a district? Maybe. Is that something that the Water Committee is looking at? Absolutely. So, in regards to water rates, and as I said from the beginning, we're not solving that tonight. We're not going to figure out what the rates are, because I want a committee made up of 2 town members, 2 village members, and chaired by our water superintendent. I want them to do a deep dive on this, and then I want them to bring that to the village board and propose that to us and say, here's where the rate should be. This is what makes sense. We've looked at it, we've crunched the numbers, we've had accountants review it, and this is what would be good for our sustainability and resiliency for our water system. And then this board is going to take that up and make a determination. We won't solve it tonight. There's no resolutions being passed tonight. So we have that to look at. We have water rates to look at. But the big issue right now from our perspective on this village board is the fact that the town continues to charge us property taxes on properties that are located within the town but that the village owns. Well, Jimmy, that's common practice. No, it's not. I put together comps with Mike Trainer. We'll show them to you tonight. Doesn't work that way in Newburgh. In the city of Newburgh, they handle water. They have properties that are in the town. The town exempts them from paying property taxes. The Newburgh Enlarged City School District exempts them from paying paying school taxes. And guess what? Representative from Orange County sitting on the front row in the Water Committee and a village resident. Orange County does not charge us county taxes on our properties where we have water facilities. Why does the town do it? Why does the school district do it? And Josh brought up a great point today. He says, look, if you're looking to do this, I understand where you're coming from, but if you're looking to do this, why would the exposure be harder for our residents and not harder for the school district? All right. I met with Harvey Sotland today, the assistant superintendent for business. We had a great conversation. And again, this is all about collegiality and figuring out a solution and a path forward. I do not want to continue to pay $200,000 in property taxes to the town and school taxes to the Cornwall Central School District when we are delivering a service to the town and a service to the school district. It makes no sense. But I also took a step back and looked at it because I talked to my board about this to make sure that we were in concert on this. And it does make sense to hold the school district, whether it's 160,000, 180,000, last year was 188,000. The town's property taxes are 14,000 or 16 or 18 or 19, somewhere around there. It does make a sense to figure out a way to make this work so that we are, I don't want to say spreading the pain, but that we are not hurting town residents on this. Look, we're all paying the same taxes, right? But the bottom line is, why are we paying property taxes and school taxes to deliver you water? Doesn't happen in other places. And I've looked, like I said, around here to figure that out. And I've got a chart full of comps for you tonight so that you can see what those differences are. Now, if we did decide to do this, and this village board is prepared to vote on it at the reorganization meeting on April 1st, unless and until we get to an agreement that we're advancing the ball forward and taking a couple of courses of action that could potentially stave this off. But when all the panic and the hysteria goes out there, and I think, you know, in reading the water rates, and Mr. Randazzo, in reading your op-ed today, your voice carries weight. You're a former supervisor. You were here for 30 years working in the town. You were on this village board for 4 years when the plus 80% was codified. Your voice carries weight. But you said in here, town water users are being grossly overcharged. We're not charging you the rate that was codified in 1980 or changed in 1989 and lessened and lowered, or changed again in 2017, lessened and lowered, or changed again. Nobody screamed back then, but because this village board, this water committee, because that's what we are, elects to consider raising town rates 92 cents per 1,000 gallons, which I have charts up here to show you how it's going to impact Mrs. McGillicuddy, how it's going to impact a family of 2, how it's going to impact a family of 4. It's hysteria and fear-mongering. $200,000 may not seem like a lot when you're the school district and you have an $82 million annual budget. We don't have that here in the village. The water department has a $3 million budget, and the village operates between $4 million and $5 million per year. So $200,000 is 7% of my water budget. And you see right there, There are 52 miles of pipes, labyrinthian pipes snaking their way through the lower village and the upper village, or Cornwall and Hudson and Cornwall, or the greater Cornwall area that need repairs. There are dams that are falling apart right now. One of our dams, the number 4 dam, the Sphagnum Dam, we had estimates from our engineers, $2 million to bring it up to standard. Parts of it are shored up with plywood 2x4s. So when I look to do this, when this board looks to do this, there are reasons behind it. And when people suggest things like, you're rushing to do this, or you're forcing an IMA on us, or the village is trying to take advantage of the town. I talk to this guy every single day, about different matters that impact the village and the town. We seek to work together. Do you remember the hysteria when we thought about standing down Kovac and standing up Cornwall EMS? Remember the people that turned out and complained at those meetings and said we were doing the wrong thing? In the year and a half that almost 2 years now, that Cornwall EMS has been in position, they have not missed one call. They have been the gold standard in this region for ambulatory EMS service, ALS and BLS. This is painful because it's change. But this is painful because we're forcing this conversation now. We're not kicking the can down the road. And that's why I thank the council, because we all don't agree on these things, and my own board. We all certainly don't agree on these things. I'm looking for fairness. The more that I scratched at the surface of this water issue, the more layers that came away. But I'm a notebook guy. I've got 3 full notebooks here of meeting minutes, of details, of Times Herald record, microfiche, of things that I've pulled up. I know the ins and outs of what we've paid, what we've charged, and what the reasons were. Who dissented on a vote, who wasn't there for the vote on it, and who voted aye for it. So we want to get to a good place here, and the good place that we're trying to get here is something fair. The village is not seeking to hurt the town or the school system, and that was something that Mr. Sotlin and I had a long conversation about today, which was working this in a collegial fashion and figuring out stuff because it impacts all of us. I have 5 kids. 4 of them graduated from Cornwall Central School District, and 1 of them is an 8th grader. I don't want to hurt the school. But the school's been paying $16 as opposed to $21.60 per 1,000 gallons for a long time. So if the school's gonna charge me school taxes, well then why am I not charging the school the fair rate that was codified in 1980 by the village board? Why am I not charging them that rate? I'm a fool not to. Is that money going into the general fund here? Nope. Is it gonna allow me to put up more memorial benches and put more sidewalks in, the things that make me happy? Nope. It's going right back into the water system. So that's the position on water rates and the position on what we are looking to do in regards to the property tax exemption. There have been some concerns in regard to the town giving us a special deal on exempting the properties because a neighboring community might be able to use that as a cudgel and say, you're doing this for them, you gotta do it for this for us. I've looked at the legal stuff on it. I'm not a lawyer. I'm married to one, and I got a close friend who's one, but I've looked at it, and we're pretty confident that if this thing ever wound its way into court, the judgment on this is you can't look at Cornwall and Hudson the same way you do Cornwall and an outside community. It's not the same. We are part of the same water system. They're not. So let that thing wind its way through. I understand the town's position. We can't exempt the property taxes because if we do that, we subject ourselves to potential litigation down the road. Okay. Then buy the properties from us for $1. We'll put together another contract. That's what these 2 guys are here for. Put together a contract that will allow us to maintain them and do everything that we've been doing. We'll mow the grass. We'll paint the buildings, we'll manage the treatment plants, we'll manage and maintain the pipes, we'll do all the same things. But if you buy it for $1, then you can exempt the property because it's yours. And then the school taxes go away because you own the property. So this is one way of looking at how we could do this without raising water rates. I am poised and prepared, and I have the votes to do this on April 1st. However, and I'm gonna shut up here, I am also open-minded enough to say if there's another way, a better way, and something that I consider and this board considers fair, let's look at it and figure it out. And with that, I will yield my time. Josh, your side, anything you want to add?
Yeah, so I mean, look, obviously on the, you know, I hope the board is certainly willing to look at the idea of purchasing the properties, you know, from the village. You know, I know that we're gonna need to get a legal opinion from council on this. This will have to be looked into, et cetera. It's gonna take some time to look at it. So this is not gonna be something we can just do next month, you know, so that's gonna take time. As far as looking at, you know, having the school district pay its fair rate, that's something that should be looked at immediately. I mean, if you look at it now, essentially, the school district has many more parcels and a much higher assessed value, and there are people in the school district that are actually not paying for their fair share of water.
Yep.
That you know, ratepayers in the town's water district are essentially carrying the load and paying some of those water fees for many years now. So I think you need to look at that right away, and how you can, you know, bring some fairness to that.
Yeah.
So
Harvey Sotlin
Yeah.
today, I should say, Mr. Assistant Superintendent, is going to take this back. He obviously has to check this out with his attorneys, because attorneys have to look at this from all angles. You have one, we have one, and obviously the school district does. And then obviously the school board is gonna have to make that decision. Now, I have offered to Mr. Sotlin, and he's gonna take it back to the superintendent and to the president of the school board, to come and, you know, make a presentation and explain what we're talking about here. But we're happy to talk to the school board about it and the school system. If the town bought the property, our understanding is that the school taxes go away. If the town exempts us, if it exempts us, the school system also has the right to refuse to exempt us from school taxes. If you own it, it's different. So that would be a consideration. John, did I get that right? We spoke about that this morning.
Correct. If the town owns it, it's automatically. If the town owns it, it's automatically exempt. But as far as the exemption under 406 of the real property tax law, the village has to go to the town, the county, and the school district separately. And each municipal board has a right to say yes or no. The town could say yes, the school district could say no, or vice versa.
Tim?
Yes, one of my concerns about, you talked about having the town purchase the property, and so all examples of high degree of responsibility and liability. Would the town, if we become ownership of those pieces of property, within the town, would there be now taking over examples, high degree of responsibility, liability, 1, 2, and 3? 1 being the violation of the Health Department of Public Water Supply, 2, capital improvements made on bonds against the village, now with the bonds against the town, would that be the case? And 3, the water department employees, and we're paying with our funds and with the taxes going to capital improvements and providing.
So we had, and I appreciate it, by the way, I made it available to all members of the town council and to all former electeds that wanted to come talk to me, and made myself available. Tim and I had a long conversation about this, and Tim, your point about that is this. I asked this morning on our call with council, you maintained from the beginning, Jimmy, this IMA is a beginning, and we do need to add addendums to it and work towards water rates, other things. This would be something in an IMA. You would absolutely, your attorney would never allow you to sign something and then expose you to, holy cow, we just did this. We thought it was a good deal. We thought we were helping the village and the water system, and now we're stuck on the hook for this. That would be part of the IMA.
Right, correct. I mean, that's why I'm going with, agreeing with Supervisor Wojciechowski, that, this is gonna take obviously time to review and go over on it, for our council to ensure that, that we're not getting ourselves jammed up, on these issues.
Well said. Agree 100%. You want to?
No, the only thing I wanted to add was, Mike already brought up that the water committee's been meeting since our first meeting was December of 2022. If you look at it this way, the code 165.6 says that we determine the rate. And I think to Jim's point before, when he was talking about fear mongering, people heard first that it was a water authority committee. Well, we had to take the name authority out. Plain and simple, it's a water committee. We could have gone down the road just based on code of just raising the rates without having to engaging at all with the town, just doing it, just like we did when we raised the rates for the village and not raise the rates for the town. So, but we didn't do that. We're reaching across and we wanted to engage with you, and we have. And I think since the point that the committee has started, Carla and Tim have expressed the town's position on everything, on every topic that we've gone through. And we have many more topics to go through. I know sometimes it takes a long time, but there's so many facets to both the water system itself as well as the sewer system. That's phase two. We're not coming to you today to talk about what the water rates are going to be with the village and the town. That hasn't been decided. The committee's working on that. Mike is providing us information. We've gotten a water master plan from our engineers. So what I'm saying is that we're doing this cooperatively. You need to give us some time. We're all in it to make it fair. We're not here to jam each other up. You can go back to the meeting minutes back in 1974 and what precipitated this 80% split. And it all came down to it all came down to the town assessment on water facilities and water lines. So that's when it all started, and that's why we're at this point. So we're focusing now on fixing that. So the fear mongering needs to go away. We're here to fix the problem. It's going to take some time. So please don't think that the village is trying to step on the neck of the town. We're not. We're trying to make it as fair as possible, as soon as possible, so we can be compensated for that small, in my mind, that small delta of where we've budget-wise, it's a big thing for us, but $200,000, as Jim pointed out, for the school district is nothing. But to reduce that. So we can work on those things that Jim pointed out before. So please, the Water Committee, we will come up with a written document in regards to, a draft document in regards to what we're going to propose to the village board. It'll be shared with the town, but that's phase one. Phase two, that's down the line. We're going to be tackling the sewer end of things too. So you just keep it holistic, keep it at the macro level, because we're diving into the micro level. So just keep that in mind.
And again, why do town residents, to Mr. Cameron's point, and it's a fair point, because I didn't know this until I got into office. I didn't. I just paid my water bill. I didn't pay attention to any of that stuff. Why do town residents continue to pay more than village residents do? Well, it's not uncommon for in-district and out-of-district to have different rates. They do it in the Village of Highland Falls and the Town of Highlands. They do it in the city of Newburgh, and the Town of Newburgh. They do it in Warwick. They do it in a lot of the close contiguous communities. They do it in New Windsor. They do it that way. And there's a reason for that. And a big part of this reason is the high degree of responsibility and liability. If a violation issued by the Health Department of the Public Water Supply is issued to the Village of Cornwall and Hudson, it's not issued to the Town of Cornwall. The town and its residents have no legal obligation to correct any violation or liability. That is our sole responsibility. Number two, when capital improvements are made to the water system that require bonds to be issued to pay for the improvements, it is the Village of Cornwall and Hudson and our residents who take out the bond and secure the bond, not the Town of Cornwall. These bonds go against the village's bond rating, not the town's. Water Department employees are employees of the village, and I mentioned this before. They're not employees of the Town of Cornwall. Currently, their salaries and benefits are paid through the water fund. If for some reason the water fund becomes insolvent or unable to live up to its commitment, the village and its taxpayers would be on the hook and required to ensure these obligations are met. That's the reason the rates will never actually be on par. Should they be closed, to Jim Kane's point, to Mike Trainor's point, that's what the committee's working on. So we are going to get to the bottom of that. And to Tim's point, I get it. We can't solve all this tonight, and we're not seeking to. I'm seeking to get our $200,000 back. That's 7% of our water budget, and that's important. And why is that important? Because there are case after case after case of other similar communities in New York State that don't do that to a community that's delivering a resource to them. Perfect example. We pay school taxes, fire district taxes, and property taxes to the Town of New Windsor. Why do we do that? Because we have a property in New Windsor that we operate out of. I don't want that money back. Why? Because we don't deliver any services to them. So when I go see Steve Bedetti, and every year, just like the town does, when they vote 5-0 to not exempt the properties, I can't complain about that. Why should he exempt it? He shouldn't, and he doesn't. But in the town, it's different. And if we are going to make this collegial, which we are, I just think it's fair that that $200,000 comes back, and there's ways to do it. Tim, to your point, I don't think it can be done by next week. And I am willing, and I think speaking on behalf of our board, I am willing to delay that. The fear mongering over the 92 cents per 1,000 gallons, when in the last 5 years, the village rates have been raised $2 and not even a cough or a hiccup. So I'm willing to delay that so long as we're advancing the ball. And I'll open it up to anybody from the town. Yes, ma'am, Councilwoman Scott.
You know, one of the things, first of all, it was good to hear, I know you and I spoke years ago about solving some issues on some private lines, and really it was unfair to people unknowingly moving into a home and not finding out that they're liable for a lot of the leaks and repairs, and you know, it's a huge burden if they actually did become part of a water district. So I'm glad to hear that that's moving forward. One of the things when we talk about property tax exemptions, and someone can correct me, it's about 30% of the properties, 33% of the properties in Cornwall are tax exempt. Now, when we say that taxes are going away, they're not going away, all right? With all due respect, they're just going to be shifted to someone else. And that is the taxpayers who are gonna say, oh, well, they're exempt, so now we get to pay more. The school district, okay, if it's exempt, right, everyone is going to pay more. So I just think that, I heard that phrase, they don't go away. They're just shifted someplace else, and we need to have that discussion, and I think there are people who, you know, let's face it, Central Hudson's has gone up, and people feel powerless about that. I speak with people in Idlewild Creek Apartments. I speak to people in Brookside. They have no control. So when, Mike, you talk about water conservation, right? It goes to one meter. And people who are trying to conserve water are being penalized. They're paying more because people are abusing that water. And people are feeling powerless, you know. They're trying to pay the rent and everything else is going up. It's not affordable to them. So I don't know how we solve that particular problem, but the water is becoming just as expensive as our heat, as our electric. It's another burden. And you know, I am concerned about exempting properties. I was sitting at the county meeting, and they did exempt the village, and I did hear that. And there was other municipalities as well. So you're not wrong with that. But again, I'm going to try to be careful what I say. But the school district and the town were also in the middle of the litigation. And I am concerned that we may actually jeopardize that, like when we're talking about exempting things. So I just want to come out and say, there's a lot of moving parts here. Just like you have moving parts, so do we. And I hope we are going to try to move in a mindful way, because I want to avoid unintended consequences to some of the decisions that are being made here. So I thank you for that. As far as the IMA, and you are right, I actually thought at this meeting we were going to sign that. And I wasn't comfortable with the fact that it changed, because it's about process. And when you go off process, people, that's where, not the fear mongering, people are suspect already. So I'm putting it out there publicly that there people were saying, it was in the Cornwall Local, we're gonna talk about this, we're gonna agree on the IMA. And that didn't happen. And I'm really hoping that in this process between the town and the village, we're more mindful, and we act in a way that we all know what's going on. We stay the course on what we're doing. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Village Board, sir?
Just to give people a sense of the state of play on this board, we've had a lot of discussions about all these issues. And there are things from tonight's discussion that we still need to hash out before we have some kind of consensus. Among them are the idea of potentially singling out the school district for a specialized rate. That's not something that I've examined deeply yet, and so that's something that I think that we all would need to consider and talk about.
Bill, to interrupt you real quick, so we did get some clarity from legal on that. So we would not seek to do that. And what Bill's referencing is, we talked about, well, to get that money back from the school district, remember, if we're charging village residents $12 per 1,000 gallons, plus 80 is $21.60. That would be an additional incurrence of, you're paying $16, just like the town, the school district is, you'd have an additional tariff of $5.60 per 1,000 gallons to get you to that. You cannot do that. You cannot pick out and specify this organization, this mom and pop store, or this resident's gonna pay a different rate. What you can do is tie it to consumption and set a particular level and say, okay, you get that rate until you reach this. The school district is our largest consumer of water. They use about 8 million gallons per year. 8 million gallons. They're our largest consumer of water. I think followed somewhere not too far south of that by NEMA, if you can believe it or not. So we would not seek to do that. Bill, I know we had talked about what can we do on that, but we would tie it to consumption if we were to go that route.
We've identified a rate increase that would result in the $200,000 recoup. I saw a commentary today, I believe, that stated that we had decided on that and passed a resolution or something. We
Which
have
is
not.
inaccurate.
It's been, just looking at a table here, and the last time the rates were raised was 2019. Oh, no, I'm sorry.
You're right.
Yeah, 2019. So that has not happened, in case anybody came here expecting that we had raised water rates. On the IMA, I know there was some concern. I raised and discussed with the mayor, the board, and council the possibility of onward sales. If we did this IMA with the town, is there any possibility that the town could then sell water outside of Cornwall or the district? To which the answer was no, but we're gonna put a provision in the IMA to make sure that that is explicitly stated, and that is.
It's already in there.
It's in there.
It's in there.
Yep, nope, absolutely. So I wanted to make sure that anybody else who had that concern should be allayed. And I said there's no increase. Yeah, and the water rate itself, the idea of raising it enough to recoup that 200,000, this is still an item that I'm discussing, within the board here. The justification for the 1980 increase that would have, that made this 80% higher disparity was to recoup the value of the property taxes that were being charged to the village. So we've sort of been chasing that differential through the rates. And at this point, the fact that the rates are as close together as they are, out of sync with the 80% that's in code, suggests that there is room there, and I'm not necessarily against the idea of trying to recoup that $200,000. And that is it for me. Just those are some of the issues that are still in play in my mind and still, under discussion with the board here, among others, among all the many that have been aired. But
Yes, ma'am.
Jimmy, what I haven't heard yet is any kind of intimation or commitment by the village to revisit the codified 80%. I've heard you say something like, we'll revisit it in an IMA or the like, but to revisit it, to repeal, to replace, I think would be, because we need to go forward with this.
Yeah.
Might be, to hear that commitment is a good first step.
Karen, excuse me, that's exactly what the water committee is looking at. One of our recent meetings, it was brought up, Mike was showing us how other municipalities, actually a few of us looked into how other municipalities do it. That's modernizing how we calculate it, how other municipalities do it. So the committee is committed to doing that. That's one of the biggest things we're looking at. So yes, that's absolutely going to happen. At the end of the day, is this 80% going to remain the same? Probably not. Probably not. So yes, we're working on that. So we're absolutely committed to that, without a doubt.
Yeah, to his
But
point.
that range being available is a scary number.
Yeah.
The idea that it was ever in place is difficult. And when I moved into the town, that was one of the first things I learned, was that we pay way more than the village, because I moved here in 2004. So I knew that this was a thing. And I saw it in my bill, and over time, I feel like the bill has become more digestible.
Right.
But I never knew why, now I know.
Yeah.
The other thing I'm concerned about is the potential to purchase the properties that you own and lease them back for whatever, because the devil is always in the details as a property owner, right? So there's a lot of liability that goes into property ownership. You're talking about large sites, with industrial fixtures and the like, I'm just be more satisfied to know that the commitment and the work that's being done to settle out some of those issues, like the liability and insurance policies and all of those really boring things, will come along with it, paid for by the water department.
Well, you have your lawyer hat on, and you're absolutely right, and we understand that, and we know that, that's where we're gonna have to do a deep dive. To your point about the 80%, does that need to be changed? Jim Kane said the same thing. The board agrees. We need to change it. Now, when Mayor Coyne's administration was dropping the rates from 70 to 52% differential to 36% differential down to its current 33% differential, it was barely a blip. But there was also not a recognition by the board at the time. It wasn't until years later that the then water superintendent, the predecessor to Mr. Trainer, Mr. June, came to the village board and said, hey, I don't know if you're aware of this, but there's a 33% differential right now, and by village code, it's supposed to be plus 80. Well, what do you do then? Do you go back and say, okay, we're gonna jack it back up? No, of course not. Has the cost changed? Of course. Look at 1978. So I was in the 7th grade, and in 1978, the village rate for water was $1.31 per 1,000 gallons. The town's was $2.36 per 1,000 gallons. But that's 80% differential. Sounds much bigger and more magnified when it's $12 and $16, and that's only 33%. But those numbers, does it make sense to change it? Yeah, and I'd like to see before I leave office, us changing the code. But the village board is not going to act to change the code until the water committee, made up of representatives from the town and the village, come and say, this is what makes sense. Then the village board will debate it and discuss it. I'll certainly share it with the town council as well, and we'll make a decision. But do I foresee or envision that being changed? Yes.
Yeah, I mean, I was gonna say, I mean, the 80%, it seems kind of like it was like this knee-jerk reaction to the town taxing the village, done out of anger and spite, and so obviously it got put in that way. Obviously, I don't think you would rewrite this the same way if you were doing this today. So, obviously the hope is that, you're gonna have a more, modern way of, explaining that in the code. And it sounds like you're looking into that, because 80% does seem, again, like a knee-jerk reaction when the town initially did this. And so
Yeah.
it does seem like this is something we should change.
Yeah. Anybody else on the village board or the town council? Yes, ma'am.
I just wanted to point out something else. I know we've been talking IMAs. The town and the village, historically, I did some research. We've had an IMA where the town agrees to re-levy the unpaid property taxes. And in the past, it used to have to be renewed every 2 years. It was also every 5 years. I mean, I'll pass this out to every.
We have it. We have it. Yeah. 1990 was 2 years. In 1999, it went to 5 years.
Right.
And we just re-upped it now, so we're good, so.
Right, but I found it to be interesting because I was trying to actually look at this. It does say, where was it? It talks about the village, they talk about the village of, whereas the village currently provides and desires to continue to provide water service outside the village boundaries to residents of the town. So there was I'm not a lawyer, but there seems to be in this.
But that was purely for the re-levy portion.
Right, but again, it's in this document as well that the village does, desires to provide services to water. I'm not arguing this, I'm just saying that there seems to be some verbiage here saying that, implying that there is an agreement. That's all I'm saying.
I just have to say that I think
Yeah.
the IMA, that agreement with you go to the end of the document,
Yes.
paragraph 9 says the intent of this is for the purpose of re-levy.
Right.
So, but in general, this IMA, this 2-page IMA is really just a written document recognizing the past 29 years. All it is we're taking what we've done and we're putting it in writing. Yes, is it added to it that it says it's for another 40 years? Well, if you want to ignore the past 129 years, what's the difference? We're still going to, we are saying in the document, we're going to supply you water like we've done for 129 years. You're going to use the water like the 129 years. I just don't understand. It's just the written document of what's been done. Nothing's changed except for the length of it. there's already a recognition that, yes, we determine the rates. It's in the IMA, but it's already in the code. Everyone already knows that.
And so everybody in the audience understands it. Yes, ma'am, one thing, let me just tell them what re-levy is, because I think we use those terms, but I don't think everybody understands. The re-levy is this: we bill you. We bill the people in the town and the people in the village for water. We handle all billing. The town does not bill for water. So we bill people in the town. Let's say that Mrs. McGillicuddy does not pay her water bill, and at the end of the year, she has an outstanding $2,400 balance, and she's not in a position to pay it. She doesn't pay it, it gets re-levied. What does that mean? That means the village, at the end of the year, sends a list of people who have not paid for their water for that year to the town. The town then sends that to the county. The county then puts that on to that person's property taxes. So that's, I'm sorry to interrupt you, I just want people to know what a re-levy is.
What I'm saying is that we have entered an agreement to assist the village to recoup the unpaid fees. That's all I'm trying to say, is that we have had an agreement and we have assisted the village in doing such.
Okay.
That's all. To help, get more money back to the village for the services they provide.
Okay. Anybody else on the Village Board or Town Council? Okay, so as we said from the beginning, we're not solving all this tonight. The Village Board would like to humbly ask the town to take a look at options, and we will certainly have our attorneys come up with some type of offer and say, this is what we think should be in it. Our attorneys will talk to your attorneys, and you'll figure out what makes sense. To Karen's point, making sure that all the i's are dotted, t's are crossed, the liabilities and all that. Can that happen? It's got to be researched, okay? In the interim, as we're going forward and we're looking at water rates, I want to say this to everybody and be patently clear about this. 3 years ago, when I became the mayor, I had people reach out to me from different neighboring communities interested in buying water. The village water system, which is the Cornwall water system, is positioned daily to supply 3.9 million gallons of water. We don't use all of that. We have 3 sources, right? We have the Taylor Road well field, we have the 5 reservoirs in Black Rock, and we have a hookup to the New York City aqueduct, the Catskill Aqueduct. We haven't been on the aqueduct and used aqueduct water in 3 or 4 years. We've been blessed or cursed with a lot of rainy seasons the last couple of years, so our reservoirs are full, our aquifers is full. We have not had to do that. But in talking to the water superintendent when I came into office, what could we potentially do in regards to selling water? We have a precious resource. What could we do in returns for taking that and then repurposing those funds back into our water system, right? Sounds simple. Now, the argument could be, Jimmy, don't touch the aquifer. We've had a couple of wet seasons. What happens when we have a couple of dry seasons? These things are cyclical. You got climate change. You got all these things that are adjusting things. You got to be concerned about that. Absolutely. But we're not advocating that. We're advocating buying water from New York City and then treating said water and then selling it at a premium. So I had a number of municipalities reach out. There was not really the stomach in Cornwall, and I'm not just going to say the town council or the village board. Again, this is a village board matter. We decide whether or not we're going to sell water, but we wanted the town to be a part of knowing what we were doing. There wasn't really an appetite to do that. But as we continue to put those Band-Aids on sucking chest wounds and we go, okay, we don't want to raise rates. I don't want to make it more difficult for people on a fixed income. You've got inflation right now. You've got the cost of everything spiraling up. We don't want to do that. But we're sitting on a resource that doesn't hurt our watershed, and we're not leveraging that. Why? I don't know. We could sell 800,000 to 1 million gallons per day. Guess what? One of the proposed deals was eagerly snatched up by New Windsor. And if you read today's Cornwall Local, I read it cover to cover today. If you read today's Cornwall Local in New Windsor News, underwater, the New Windsor Town Board passed a resolution authorizing the supervisor to execute a temporary water supply purchase agreement with the Village of KJ. The town agrees to supply up to 500,000 gallons of potable water per day to the village. Supervisor Stephen Bedetti said the agreement has already netted the town about $32,000 in revenue. Don't raise my water rates, but we're not willing to explore water sales, not touching our aquifer or our watershed. Okay? So I went over to New Windsor and I sat down with their town attorney and with their supervisor. And I went through their agreement. I had to foil it because those are the rules, but I went through their agreement. They're selling water to the village of Kirai Joel for $9.16 per 1,000 gallons with a 15% administrative charge. They're averaging about 368,000 gallons per day in sales. They're capped and maxed up at 500,000. For the village and for our water system, not to explore the potential to sell water that doesn't damage our watershed or touch our aquifer, I think is foolhardy. It's difficult to figure out ways to keep costs low. I'd love to lower the village water rates, which have been the only ones that have increased. In the last 5 years, the town water rates have increased 44 cents. The village water rates have increased over $2. Didn't make the newspaper, did it? No hue and cry, no complaints, no angry letters. It just happened. But we're being public and transparent about this, just like with water sales. So I'm gonna open this up like that to the town council and the village board. The village board has discussed this, I don't wanna say at length, but every now and then when we get an offer from another community, it could be Washingtonville, it could, I'm just using this speculatively, it could be Woodbury, it could be Monroe, it could be KJ. Should we not explore that? I think it's an abdication of duty not to at least look at it. When we've got children and grandchildren that are gonna be here long after we're gone, and we're gonna saddle them with those 52 miles worth of pipes that desperately are needing replacement. So I'll open it up. To anybody on the board or on the council? Bill?
From the time that I first learned that it was even conceptually possible to sell water outside of the confines of Cornwall and Hudson, which was about a year ago, I just have three, I think I just have three, like, strong dictums that, or dicta, I guess, plural, that apply. And the first one is that any water deal has to, first and foremost, allow current and future residents of Cornwall and COH unencumbered, entirely unencumbered access to a dedicated, high-quality water supply. Number two, has to ensure that Cornwall and COH retains all control over all supplies designated as backup for our own supply, and provide reasonable, perpetual financial incentive for Cornwall in the event that any kind of deal cedes any sort of control of any current water source. And I feel like those are pretty high bars, and I was not convinced that the structure of the kinds of deals that were not even contemplated, but conceptually possible, I wasn't sure that they would meet those bars. That said, I've never said, certainly never said out loud, absolutely not, we must never sell water outside of the confines of Cornwall and Hudson. But I would have to be convinced that those three things would be true in perpetuity, because I recognize that the difficulties that you might encounter once you engage in water sales, you do have to, in order to tap the aqueduct, you do have to have a water supply that's equivalent to it from an alternate source to the amount that you're drawing down. So how that alternate source would be designated is vital to understand. That being the main thing. If it impacts any of the other sources that we currently have, since, as the mayor said, we haven't used it for a while because we haven't had to. That one being of singular importance to me. And then just ensuring that this town and village, to the extent that we want to grow or extend our water system, in the land which is encompassed, where the water is sourced primarily, absent the aqueduct, that the water supplies that are generated from here locally are first and foremost intended for whomever lives on the surface of this land. So, regardless of who that is in the future, 20 years from now, water from Cornwall should be for Cornwall residents, first and foremost. So anyway, that's the kinds of things that are in my mind about the possibility of water sales.
Okay, thank you, Bill. Anybody else? Yeah, Josh.
So, look, obviously the devil's in the details. And so, it's important to, anything that would obviously the village can do this with or without the town. I would hope that we would have the chance, should you decide to do this, to actually review, what you would be agreeing to, because certainly, if you go out to Taylor Road, that is in the town. that's a certain area of town that we rely on for tourism and for other, we have property owners out there that are on wells. That's a concern if that was going to be a backup capacity, or if any water from those wells were ever going to be sold, because we know that well water from below ground does not have to be treated. It's actually it's much easier and cheaper to sell water from below ground. So certainly in terms of the aqueduct, my understanding is that the state's working on a second pipeline that will be ready in 5 to 10 years, and that'll serve as backup to some of the folks that are already on the aqueduct. So in 5 to 10 years, really this is going to solve the problem for a lot of municipalities in this area that are able to tap into that. I guess the other thing I would say too is that obviously, yes, water needs to be for, COH and Cornwall residents first. We need to make sure that we're going to have an adequate supply for any future residential or planned commercial growth. There's still large areas of the town that are not developed. We don't know what that's going to look like in decades to come. So we have to make sure that we have adequate water. But again, I get back to the devil's in the details on this.
I just want to add to what Josh was just saying, and that's in regards to the parallel aqueduct. What's it called, the Delaware or? Delaware. So the opportunity window here is relatively short. You're talking about probably 10 to 12 years because of the fact of this aqueduct coming in. So from my perspective, yeah, I'm absolutely open to selling water, but obviously I'm not going to sit here and repeat the things that Bill and Josh said. We already know that the primary recipients of that, beneficiary of the water, are the town and village residents, understood. But I think too is that, keep in mind, is that when that aqueduct, we have excess water to sell. That aqueduct will probably be in place in about 10 to 12 years. So the window is closing. So if we want to take advantage of selling that excess water, then the opportunities in front of us in the near term, and that's what we definitely need to think about. And that's, again, one of the things that the Water Committee is also looking at.
So in regards to water sales, in order to increase water sales from within the community, there would be a need to either increase usage by our existing customer base, or, here we go, from increased development, which promotes new users. Now, I've been to all the meetings for Treetop and those matters.
Okay, treetop, yeah, okay.
Yeah.
And what I mean by that is that I live in Western Cornwall, and a lot of the actual water source properties on Western Cornwall. And there's a lot of big transit mains already out there, and it's very easy to extend. Matter of fact, there's a new subdivisions going out there very shortly, and next, probably this year or the next year after, and stuff. So that's starting to develop. There's a lot of land out there that, that open space hasn't picked up yet, that eventually is gonna get developed and stuff. And as that happens, the community grows over the next 20 years. I too am very deeply concerned about that. So as we explore this, and I'm willing to explore it, I just want to make sure that all of Cornwall is protected. That's
Great point. And to piggyback and just finish on what this looks like. So let me give you a view of what this looks like and what's potentially being left off the table. The sale of an additional 12 million gallons on an annual basis, with subsequent equivalent increases each year thereafter, would generate enough revenue to maintain our current fund balance, which we have, as I said to you, it's public information, about $1.6 million in our rainy day fund for emergencies, fund $45 million in capital improvements, and allow annual rate increases to be kept at just below 1 to 2% each year for the next 30 years to a water rate that would be equal for both village and town users, or as close to equal as possible. So again, we don't have any deal in hand, but if we don't at least explore this, and again, in the past, these things were done quietly and things were talked about, offers were made, it was never discussed publicly. Let's talk about it publicly. We've put stuff in the newspaper, we've put stuff on social media, we've talked about this at our meetings, and we're doing these joint special meetings to talk about the potential and the efficacy of exploring water sales. That would help us bring the rates more in line. That would help us either reduce the rates or keep them in a state of stasis for as long as possible. Anybody else on the town or the village board wish to weigh in on potential water sales? Yes, ma'am.
When are we going to see, I know there's, the committee has been working on the draft of the proposal. When are we going to actually see that?
Mike, you want to address that?
Yeah, so it was our hope to get it out to you by this time.
Yeah.
But quite honestly, with different natural disasters that we've experienced and the daily operations have ticked up, and I haven't had time to put it together. And some of these items that the board is discussing obviously is part of that. But we do hope to get that out in the next month or so. Yeah, I would think so.
Yeah, I just think it's important to get all the pieces of the puzzle, you know, to actually have an informed discussion. So I appreciate it.
And I don't know, Mr. Mayor, the engineers, they did put together some graphs, about what the potential water sales could do. As well
Dan,
as
can you speak to that?
if we don't have any additional revenue, what it would cost.
Can you speak to that if we put the charts up?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, Mike, you want to put the charts up? These are going to be difficult to see. We have as big a monitor as we could possibly have, but they're going to be difficult to see. But Darren can speak to it and kind of provide some actual color to what you can or cannot see on the screen.
So which one would you like first?
Scenario one,
Which is, which one?
it should be that one.
That one?
Yes. So this is a graph that shows annual distribution system costs of maintaining and repairing the water mains, capital costs, annual operating costs of the water system. The blue line at the very top shows the total annual expense of the water system. The black line, it's a little bit difficult to see, but that shows annual revenue from water sales and other sources. And the green line at the bottom is the reserve fund. So scenario one up here considers a 2% rate increase annually and a 2 million gallon water production increase based on population growth in the village and town. So this is what will happen to
What was the percentage of population growth? You know?
it's quite small based on census data.
I was gonna say, I hope so.
Yes, a 2 million gallon increase per year is an additional 5,500 gallons per day.
Okay.
So it's pretty small.
Yeah, that's,
Pretty conservative.
thank you.
And I think they put that together as pretty small because they recognize the village is pretty much built out. And with the town, with their conservation easements and whatnot, there ain't too much heavy development going on up there. Some of those spots.
And to compare this 2% rate increase, as the mayor mentioned earlier, the rates were last increased in 2019, and they haven't been increased in the last several years. But if we break that increase down from 2019 to now, it's less than 3% per year. And this graph considers a 2% annual increase. But you can see that the reserve fund drops down very quickly, and it will be impossible to recover it in this scenario.
Excuse me, would it be possible for you to speak more directly into the microphone? It's difficult to hear you.
Sure.
Thank you.
The next one?
Just to point out,
That's not going to amplify it. That just goes to the live stream.
That's the live stream.
Yeah.
Didn't know.
I will.
And again, when you're talking about those rates, between 2010 and 2017, there were no rate changes, no increases in the village or in the town. In 2017, 2018 village budget, the rate was increased $1 for village water users, none for the town. And then the following budget, 2018, 2019, town was increased 44 cents, the village was increased $1.44. So, since 2017, village residents have had their water rates increased $2.44. Town residents have had them increased 44 cents. Just to give perspective to the 92-cent perspective that we were talking about earlier. Thank you, Maya. Go ahead.
You're welcome. So this is the second scenario. It considers a 2 million gallon annual increase in production again. But this time we have a 5% increase in rate for 10 years, in the water rate for 10 years, then 4% for another 10 years, and then 3%. So this will enable the village's revenue from sales to balance out their annual operating costs and capital costs. And while it does deplete the reserve fund, it will recover eventually.
Good.
Now, the third scenario considers a 2% increase in water rates for 15 years and then a 1% increase in rates, as well as a 12 million gallon increase in production. 2 million of that would be expected to come from existing users in the village and town, and then 10 million would come from sales. Not necessarily through permanent connections to other municipalities. It could be trucked water, it could be water to fill pools, or anything like that. But that would enable the village to maintain their reserve balance.
And Maya and the team pointed out, $12 million annually is simply a 35,000 gallon a day increase annually to our production. So it's only 35,000 gallons a day that we'd be selling that could see that positive effect.
That's 35,000 gallons a day compared to last year's average rate of 650 gallons per day.
600.
Yes.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, Mike, the only other graph, I'm not gonna use the water rate comps before we let folks again speak, and then we'll move to public comment. And I apologize, these things are intertwined, because I feel like we're jumping from water rates to water sales, back to water rates. But there is synergy between these two things. Mike, you put this up, you may not be able to see it, but what we wanted to do was to kind of show you impact. So what would a 92 cent on 1,000 gallons on an average user or a couple of different average user situations turn out to be? Okay.
So this is real life.
This is real life. And I always talk about Mrs. McGillicuddy, right? But we did a senior couple. So let's talk about two people on Social Security that are, I'm pretty close too. Yes, yes.
Just to clarify, the 92 cents is the amount identified that would yield $200,000 additional revenue.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Bill. So for the demographics, a senior couple. Now, I asked Mike to pull this up. Does every senior couple in the village and the town consume 3,600 gallons of water every billing cycle or every month? No. But we took some averages and we kind of rounded this out to give you perspective. So the total current rate at $16 cost per billing cycle is $57.60. By increasing it by 92 cents would bring it to $60.91. Per billing cycle, our billing cycles are every 2 months. It would be $3.31. The additional cost per month would be $1.65. Family of four, their consumption per billing cycle, that's a 2-month span, is about 12,000 gallons. Their current rate would be $192. It would go up to $203.04. The difference in the billing cycle for 2 months would be $11.04. The additional cost per month for a family of four, on average, approximately, would be $5.52. And then at the bottom, we did a young couple who might use 6,000 gallons of consuming per billing cycle. What it would work out to be $2.76 per month. Now, that's money, and that's real money, and I'm not trying to dismiss it and saying that's nothing, it's a rounding error. It's not. That's real money. But I'm just trying to show perspective of what changing these rates would be. I am happy to move tonight with my board to table the April 1st, it's on our agenda, to raise the town's rates 92 cents. And I have the votes. But I am happy to table it in light of the conversations that have been ongoing, and I thank the supervisor for that. I thank the town council, and I thank the school system for having Mr. Sotland come over and agree to take this up with the school system to help us out on the $200,000. And in return for that, we just continue to work in good faith towards finding out what those righteous rates should be, where they end up. Take counsel from our water committee that comes in every month. They sit right next to my office in the work session room. I hear them. Sometimes they're in there for 2 hours or 2.5 hours, and they're not getting paid 1 red cent to do it. They're doing it because they're volunteers and they care. So we will take counsel from them, and then we'll make a decision. So I'm willing to do that, to push this board to wait, take it off the agenda for our work session, so long as I know that we are working in that direction to figure out some way for the village to recoup the $200,000 or 7% of our water budget. Anybody on our board agree, disagree, or? Agree? Agree? Bill? Lori? Okay, all right, good. The town's okay with that? We're taking that approach on this to continue the talks in regards to water rates and to await the findings of our water committee and make sure that you guys all get a copy of what their findings are.
Yes.
Okay, that's fair? Okay, yes, sir.
I think I'm jumping back.
Okay.
We are blending.
We are blending.
But, and this relates to water sales, but is not about sales. What you've identified over the course of the evening and many, many conversations prior, is that we have a ticking bomb of water infrastructure. There's a massive need to update the dams. There's a massive need to replace pipes. We've identified all of the work that's been done in recent years, but there's much more to come. And that's going to span decades, a couple of decades of work to get it up to where it needs to be so that it's, managing for the future. We've talked about sales as a possible mechanism for funding those kinds of improvements. I wonder if we want to, and maybe we have, but I'm not sure I've seen it. And if I have, I apologize, but always possible. Let us look at how traditionally one would fund the increase the improvements to a water system, something of a very expensive process that would take a long time to do, which would mean multiple rounds of borrowing. And looking at what those graphs would look like if we were borrowing money and paying debt service on it, and using that as the revenue source, or for whatever other sources might exist in the world. If suddenly the federal government was able to wave a $10 million wand and do that every couple of years for a few years, etc. I think that would also be instructive to say, this is an alternative. This is how much it would cost if we were borrowing that money and then paying it off over time, over generations, really, to get to where we would need to be. So I just wonder if that's something we want to.
Now, borrowing would be through what, the EFC, most likely? You would be able to, get the lower rates if you're going through the EFC, get subsidized interest. So potentially, I don't know if you're going to get it to the point where you're, paying almost no interest on this. I mean, I know there's also, in some cases, you can actually get loan forgiveness from the EFC for certain types of designated projects. I don't know how easy that is to get. I know some communities in Orange County have sought that. I believe they've gotten that in some cases. But certainly, borrowing money through the EFC is certainly the way to go versus, because you get lower rates. You get subsidized interest rates.
That's what we've done
Yeah.
as EFC.
Yeah.
And we don't qualify for forgiveness.
Okay.
Correct me if I'm wrong, Mike, but one of the things, one of the reasons why I kind of went forward with the IMA is because having an IMA with our municipality as one now will actually potentially benefit that process.
Potentially.
Oh,
For some of the intermunicipal grants that are out there, absolutely.
Yeah, so it gives you a better chance of getting a WIA intermunicipal grant. Now that we have an IMA, we can apply for the joint municipal grants. It makes it, more likely that they could actually get a WIA grant because they can include our population and our, per capita income in that application, which I think is lower than than the village.
Good point.
And some of the rural development grant programs that are out there, it still won't help us because the village is seen as the owner and they use our demographics.
Obviously what is the threshold in terms of population or users?
It's all on household median income.
Median income.
Oh, and
Yeah.
if the median income is higher, you're not gonna be qualified.
That and the environmental justice zones, and our engineers could probably talk a little bit more about that.
Yeah, and they have environmental justice areas, that's one of the grading aspects of the grants.
Like, for example, like PFAS,
Yeah, well, it's more like where minorities are located.
Okay.
They're experiencing some sort of environmental injustice. So those areas are designated environmental justice areas, and I don't believe there is none in the village.
Okay. Like, I'm thinking out in the town, there are some places that were actually, there's superfunds, sites. I know in a lot of that water out there is mostly well water, correct? And if you
Yeah.
wanted to go, this is a big idea, but municipal water or having municipal water available, especially if those wells become,
Yeah, IE ain't going alone.
yeah,
Right, the IMA would help.
okay.
Mike, we'll make a shameless plug here for the water department. The current consumption, remember I said that we're capable, or we're permitted for 3.9 million gallons of water per day. But the current consumption in the Cornwall water system is 770,000 gallons.
Last year, 2023, we just put in our withdrawal reports as state. The average was 657,000 gallons per day.
So two things. One is people are conserving water, which is a good thing. But number two, Mike, at the peak, and this was probably, 4 or 5 years ago, before the great leak detection efforts that the water department has undergone, what was our consumption in comparison to 600 and change?
1.3 million.
$1.3 million, so,
1.3
Gallons.
gallons.
oh, gallons.
And at that time, that is why the village underwent the improvement project at the wells, so that we could increase our withdrawal from there from 1 million gallons a day to 2 million.
Got it.
Because without that increase, we couldn't meet our daily demand.
Yeah.
Now we meet it pretty easily. Our wells shut down for about 10 hours a day now, where they used to run 24 hours a day. They
Yeah.
shut down, the aquifer recharges.
Yeah.
The 2 years ago, when we had the dry summer, our aquifer levels out there were higher than they've ever been.
And the replacement of smart meters, are we up to like 97, 98% of residents that have had us do that?
So there are 47 outstanding meters that need to be replaced
Out of total, how many accounts? 2,600 accounts.
And there's about a dozen of them that are coming from an apartment complex that are gonna be done.
Yeah. So the good thing about the smart meter that we're encouraging people, there's no cost to them for us to install this for them. The purpose in that is that before, first of all, the meters just weren't as accurate as they are now, and there was a lot of estimation done. So sometimes people would get overestimated and righteously complain, or they would get underestimated, and at the end of the year, all of a sudden they owe a bunch of money because once we got the actual reading, it wasn't consistent with what the with what the averages had been. So this is helping in the system. All right. With that said, anything else from the board or the council before I open it to public comment? Yes, ma'am.
We've discussed this, you and I privately before, but one concern I've had in the whole system itself is that the overabundance calculation that we're carrying more water than we can use or that our residents that need. And because water, clean water, is a right in this state now, I am concerned projected forward that if we don't think about it as a human right and institute best practices with respect to selling to neighbors that don't have access to that right, that we will be incentivized by a different municipality, the county or the state, in a way that is unpalatable to us to engage in this process. So I know it's not on anyone's table, no one is saying that out loud, but the drum is beating for housing in that regard. I can't imagine that water won't be on the table at some point. And so I'd love it if the water committee could see water as the abundant resource that we have, but also think of the human factor when considering sales as well.
Yeah, I was gonna say the mayor and I have we've had this discussion too, over the past couple of years, and my understanding is, so I guess in the state of New York, water below ground, does that belong to the municipality or does that belong to New York State? Like who actually decides that ultimately? Yeah.
And go ahead.
Yeah, so that's another wrinkle, but I don't know how often that's actually been used and brought up in,
Yeah, so it's actually happened a couple of times. There is case law that supports what Councilwoman Edelman Reyes just pointed out, where not necessarily a contiguous community, but a community in close proximity that had an overabundance of a precious resource was compelled by the state to make available to a neighboring community some of that water. So yeah, does it happen often? Hasn't. I think there were 2 or 3 cases that we researched and found where it had happened in the past, so it's on the table. but it is something to think about, doing this. And again, I thought it was going to make the paper on the front page, the fact that, a deal between KJ and New Windsor had happened. It was page 7 in the Times Herald record in a paragraph.
Let me just be the devil's advocate on the other side of that argument. So now you sell water to Johnny and his family, and you're selling them water, and you have a contract for 24 months. Now, at the end of 24 months, you say, we're done with this contract, and the state says, well, they have no water, you can't shut them off. What about that side of it?
Dave, very real possibility. I read cover to cover the contract between New Windsor and KJ. There are line items in there where it suggests this contract will end here and this contract will end when, this period of time, the 24 months, 36 months ends. Or if either party, for whatever reason, decides that they want to restructure it. Could the state compel them to keep it there? Yes. There's 2 ways of selling water. There's doing it by a connection, which is obviously cheaper and much more efficient, but locks you into a connection, or to have it trucked. Now, if you have it trucked, obviously it's much more cost prohibitive, and the people on the other end that are getting the trucked water, they don't want to pay the premium to do that, because you're selling them the water, and then you're also charging them the trucking fees for that. So obviously a hookup, a connection is what's desired. But those are the 2 options. You can sell it by the truck, or you can make a connection. But Dave, your point is very real, and could that happen? Sure. All right, anything else in this matter before I open it up to public comment? Yes, sir.
If we could, if our water committee members would like to speak.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, Mike, good point.
I just want to give you the opportunity.
I just want to make one quick point. Thank you, Mike. And I think you did a very great job, Mayor, of elaborating the difference in the water rates, why there can never be parity, right? Because if there's an innate cost and liability with an owner, operator, or system, you see that everywhere. In my profession, I've seen it everywhere, in district, out of district. And as we get into the conversation about whether it makes sense for the town to buy the property, and I think a couple of town board members very, I think legitimately said that, if that were to happen, there needs to be certain protections to the town, right? And I just think that also speaks to the fact of why there can't be parity, right? Because as soon as we start talking about the town, and rightfully so, taking on some of that responsibility of the ownership, then it's, you'll say, well, wait a second, we need those protections, right? So I think it just speaks to the fact that there can't be total parity.
Yeah.
And I think your point was already made. It's almost a viewpoint for me to say this, but I just want, and rightfully so, if I'm gonna take a property, I'm gonna say, let's make sure that I'm protecting my taxpayers, right? And I think so the board members, I think, are absolutely correct in saying that, but I just wanna say it plays into that whole argument that's the point. There is liability to the village because they're an operator user in the system. It can't be total parity, but our committee, our committee is very much looking at being very transparent to show how the calculations come up, because in the past there were no real calculations. It was sort of, emotional decisions. We wanted to show that everybody understands how the decisions were made and why they were made, and then we can all be good.
Thank you. And Eric, his experience and expertise in the Department of Public Works, being the head honcho in the county, has brought invaluable insight to the committee. And I'll turn to Ms. Carla, because she is also the chair of the Cornwall Conservation Advisory Council. And again, getting that perspective now from the environmental aspect of it and having her ask those tough questions has been invaluable as well. So Carla, is there anything you'd like to add?
Thank you, Mayor. Yes, and I think that last time I spoke about what a really good experience it's been to be on the water committee because of the issue of transparency, and that continues to be the case. I have asked extremely hard questions. I basically grilled Mike on a number of issues, and people who know me know that I asked a lot of questions. And I have to say that I have never felt that anything has been hidden. And I feel that the committee is really good at discussing all the different issues that are brought up. So I have a lot of confidence that we will arrive at something that is beneficial for both the town and the village. That being said, I do think it's important to look at the water rates. alongside the cost for managing the sewage system. Because I kind of disagree on a phased approach on that. I think it needs to be something that is happening at the same time, because then what if the analysis of the sewage system reveals that the water rates have come up a little bit too high, for example? I firmly believe that we should be doing both at the same time. I know that there may be a concern in terms of timing, how to approach that. But I do think that that is really important. So I want to thank Mike for doing such an excellent job, and you, Mayor, for being so transparent and pursuing this approach and involving the town to the degree that you have. I think it's really commendable. And I'd just like to make a point of clarification on EJ zones. It's low income and minority populations, not just minorities. Thank you.
Thank you, Carla. And if the town is willing to put out a nice spread of Irish soda bread, coffee, and donuts, the village is prepared. The board will travel uptown, and we are prepared to talk about sewer. We're actually looking forward to it, and Josh and I have been talking about that, and that is going to be ongoing. We just had a little bit of a head start on this, and while the town is putting together their perspective on things, they are going to welcome the village into it, and we look forward to it. This is the way that a community, an intra-community like this should be working, so. Thank you again, Carla. All right, without further ado, because we are on schedule. I tried to say 2 hours. Let's go to public comment. If anything came, Mr. Cameron, I was hoping that you were going to say you were going to come up and speak again.
I just want to thank you very much for educating me on the complexity of making water rates.
Sir, pleasure meeting you tonight, and trust me when I say this. I had to learn this too. I did not know any of this before I got into office. We're lucky and blessed. We got a good water department, a good water superintendent, and infrastructure is not sexy. It's not fun talking about it. It's not cool. It doesn't get a lot of attention, but it's important, and I'm glad that the town and the village are tackling this. Thank you for those words. All right, so going down next in line, Toya and Taylor Stovall, 227 Taylor Road. If you could step right up there again. And if you can just state your name and your residence again.
Hi, my name is Toya Stovall. I live at 227 Taylor Road. I live very close to the Taylor Road wells, so part of my concern here is about the, potential for any sale of water that will then result in a potential draining of water down from that well. The other big concern that I have is, I'm one of the younger people in this room. I am very invested in continuing to live here until my eventual demise. Starting off on a bright note. So I'm wanting to make sure that in our discussions of the potential sale of water, we are making choices that are supportive to our residents and the community that we've built here that's so wonderful. I think one of the big challenges that I've seen as, we're watching Curious Joelle expand is that you see, like in Washingtonville, property values have really decreased, and as there's encroachment into some of the other communities, like you're talking about how water is a human right. Let's talk about human rights. Women and Curious Joelle have some pretty big challenges. I would love to feel confident that my community stays safe for any children I might have. That's important to me. And as we give water, which is a resource for community growth, to a neighbor, which may encroach on some of our other, essentially liberties. And I know that sounds really dramatic and, it's just, I want to make sure that my community is a place that we all feel safe and that we're being careful. If it's only a 10-year span in which we can spend this money and potentially get the water sold, it's only a short-term patch. If we could take out money with very limited interest, and we're amazingly managing to run a water department at a positive rate, it seems questionable to me the necessity to sell the water.
Fair points. Thank you.
All right.
All right, thank you for those comments. Mrs. Dubin, are you still here? You're gonna have to, go around that way.
Hello, I'm Toya Dubin. I live at 234 Taylor Road. The first thing I want to do is to commend Mike Trainer and the whole water department. It's a pretty extraordinary story to hear that the rate of water usage has dropped by almost 100% in such a short period of time, and the implementation of all those smart meters and everything. It's just, that's extraordinary. And as having grown up in the town that essentially was the very beginning of the conservation movement in this country, and that spent 17 years fighting to keep Storm King a beautiful mountain to hike on instead of letting Con Ed lop the top off of it to create an electric plant, it's pretty awesome to see that conservation in action. I also think it's really great that the town supervisor and the mayor of the village are working together so wonderfully well. That's pretty awesome also. I'm wishing that there was a little bit more of a bent towards public comment before things get adopted and before things get signed. I really wish that there was a little bit more of an eye towards that. I do understand that you have a water committee and that the people who are on it are super dedicated to their effort, but I think perhaps a little bit more frequent opportunity for public comment before adoption would be really, really good for the feeling of the town. Your constant mention of fear-mongering, I think a lot of that would really go away if you gave us an opportunity to really sit in there and say, okay, let's put the IMA up on a wall and let's get another wall with some chalk and let you guys, I don't know, say all the things you wish were in it. And we'd all get it out of our system, and maybe none of it would get in there, but people wouldn't be feeling like democratic process wasn't followed. Because what it feels like now is like there's this announcement that an IMA is going to take place, and it's going to be signed tonight. And instead, the version that I pulled down when you let me know that it was there and the version that you actually signed, those are not the same. And that was an interesting surprise for me. And so
You're talking about the change in regards to the village was not going to allow the town to sell water, correct?
I'm talking about the fact that there were changes in it, right?
What were the other changes? Okay, you finish. I'm sorry. Go ahead and finish.
Yes, because that's always the challenge. I get myself lost then, and
all right. Go
it's
ahead.
not good. But I do think that I would have had some suggestions for how to improve the IMA. I think there are a lot of other people who might have had suggestions about how to create a little bit more balance in the IMA, and you may or may not have implemented them, but an opportunity for that to happen would have been really, really good. I do think that one of the first amendments that I would suggest to that IMA would be that the Village of Cornwall should not be able to sell water to a third party without issuing a public referendum for approval by the people within the entire greater Cornwall area. I think that water is a very precious resource. I think it's a really big decision that you're talking about, and I think that it should be something that the people as a whole agree upon because it's the people's water. That's what I think. I think that the question of the profitability of the sale of water needs to be very carefully examined and understood, because one of the things that's been a little disturbing is that this draft report that we keep seeing, like here's one of those charts that was in the last, and I took another cell phone picture of the ones today, and I'll be like trying to examine those and understand them, but I won't have had any real period of time to read and understand the details, and it'll get voted on, and then we get an opportunity to comment. Again, if there was a little bit more upfront transparency, longer period for comment, and then an adoption, I think you would find things go so much smoother. People would be so much easier about it. They would have much less anxiety, and this would all be much more fun. So That's my main comment. I wish for a greater opportunity to look at things in advance and to offer my ideas, and whether they are accepted or not, I understand that's democratic process. You don't always win everything. So, thank you very much for the opportunity to speak.
Thank you. And I want to point out that you and your husband were gracious enough to host myself, the town supervisor, the deputy supervisor, the deputy mayor, and the water superintendent out at your home to come out and talk about this. Gosh, probably back when we did this first, had the first IMA discussion meeting about the water system master plan back in September. And thank you. But there's just a couple of things I wanted to add on here. I've made 2 promises in 3 years as mayor that I've not been able to keep. And the first one, I had to go to somebody that I promised we're gonna do this. And then after speaking to council and finding out that we couldn't do this, I had to go back to those people and apologize. And I'm gonna apologize to you 2 guys publicly, Mr. and Mrs. Dubin, because sitting around your kitchen table, I promised you that before we would consider water sales, we would put this up for public referendum. I was wrong. I thought it made sense. I thought it was fair and righteous. However, if I allow that to happen, when I say I, the village board goes in that direction. If I decide that we're gonna put a memorial bench in front of Village Hall and somebody doesn't want one there, they're gonna demand a public referendum. If I decide to build a pavilion down at the waterfront and somebody doesn't want it there, they're gonna demand we put it up for a public referendum. It's just impossible to do that. And on the advice of council, I have to apologize to you publicly because I told you I would do that. And that's the reason why we're not doing that. In regards to the IMAs, do you know how many IMAs I signed per week? So if we held a meeting for every IMA, Mike Trainer talked about 3 of them just on one project uptown with the water system. We wouldn't get anything done. This is big and this is important to this village board. It's certainly important to me. However, I've got 9 other things just like this. They may not be as controversial or as polarizing, and to your point, maybe, this because you knew it was gonna be the third, rail on the subway system, but it's just difficult to do that for everything. We are transparent. We live stream our meetings. I use social media. Now granted, the mayors before me, we didn't have social media like we do today. I use it recklessly. I use it too much, probably. I put things in the Cornwall Local. I spelled out a 1,000-word treatise on what we're looking to do in the water system and why, to allay people's fears, to stop the fear-mongering. And there has been, not you, that's not you guys, but there has been some fear-mongering. The village is threatening to shut off the water to the town. The village is looking to raise town rates to $21.60. You're acting punitively, meaning I'm seeking to punish the town. None of that is true. I went to the town when this guy got elected and I said, can we talk about water? Would you be a partner on this? And he says, absolutely. What do we need to do? I want to set up a committee. I want to include the town. And we followed that road. But I want to apologize to you for not putting this up on a public referendum because I told you to your face I would. One of 2 promises in 3 years that I had to walk back and say, I cannot do it. On the advice of council and because the village board felt that that would be unwieldy and inappropriate, I can't do it. That's my fault. I never should have said it, and I did that. In regards to the IMA, you mentioned that it was one-sided. But the village owns the water system, and when it's one-sided, we couldn't make it equal. I couldn't say, you get everything that we get. We own the system. So there's that piece of it. It certainly was going to be structured. I don't want to sell Josh water and then Josh turns around and sells it to Washingtonville. But he's not going to tell me that we can't sell water because we own the system. And the last thing is talking about the watershed. You guys are not on the water system. You don't pay into our water. You don't. You have a well, right? So you don't pay into the water system. How do I decide who gets a say in this? Is it village residents that pay into the water system? Village residents at large? Because we have folks that are on wells. Town residents that pay into the water system, town residents that are on wells. How do I do that? So we're looking to be fair, we're looking to be transparent. But you also, the one thing where I want to clear this up again. The watershed would not be touched by water sales. The watershed would not be touched by water sales. We're talking about buying water off of the aqueduct from New York City at a low rate, treating it and selling it at a premium. How does that affect our watershed?
You have to have a backup supply.
I get that. We have an abundance of water. We're using 600,000 and change, and we're permitted for 3.9 million, but I see the point. But anyhow, I appreciate you guys, Mr. Mustubman, because you came, you talked about it. I will take into consideration everything that you said. You articulated it appropriately. I looked at some of the things that you wanted in the IMA, and I'm thinking to myself, if I'm Josh or I'm you, I'd want that too. I got to figure out a better way to message these things, because I always have people saying to me, but you didn't put it out. And I'm like, well, I did it here, and there, but maybe I missed this and I should have looked at that. I will work on that. Thank you for your comments. I appreciate it. Yes, Bill?
Question for, I count 5 attorneys, but two that matter the most, perhaps. And I might be missing a couple, sorry.
He's not here.
If the village board did vote or wished to hold a vote to engage in water sales, I imagine that would be an action under SECRA that would require public hearings and things. I'm not asking you for a binding legal opinion, but am I out of left field? Is that wrong? Or
I don't
think so. I don't know.
I don't think so, only because I've looked at the contract between New Windsor and KJ. I do not believe SEQRA was mentioned in there. Could it have been a separate thing? Maybe, but I'm
Well, if you had
not
to
sure.
expand or update a plant to treat the water before you sell it, that would be binding, or to do the section.
Development
Yeah.
of physical
You would have heard
activity
about
or
that secret
construction.
So the connection-
New Windsor too in the paper. That's why.
No, not
No,
referendum.
there's
I
only
just mean
certain
public
statutory
hearings under SECRA.
referendums. You
I
need a
mean, Jim, I think
statutory-
that's another important point to me. I don't believe it's a referendum item.
Yeah, separate of referendum. I was just talking about
No, I'm
public
just
hearings
saying,
prior to.
because people, that's a question people have. I don't believe it's.
So
an
there's like
item-
2 or 3 things. John or Steve, can
in the state statutes.
you
as
give us a
far-
couple examples of things that require a referendum? I'm putting you on the spot here.
Yes, you are. Thank you.
terms of office.
Changing terms of office. There's a good
I do
one.
not believe that sales of water could be subject to permissive referendum.
You don't believe that it could
You
be?
can only
That,
have
It has,
mandatory referendum.
yes.
You can only require it if it's a statutory basis for either permissive or mandatory referendum. If it's permissive, you can make it mandatory as the board. If it's not on the list of statutory things, you can't hold a referendum.
Correct.
Your bench example, for example.
I think we've been told this before.
yeah, well,
Or LoSAP is.
I learned new things every day, and I learned in this instance, so.
Regardless of.
What?
Which we're gonna do it anyway.
Yeah, regardless of the SECRA requirements under SECRA, or whether it's subject to a referendum, mandatory or permissive, I have no doubt that either this board or any future board would only vote on water sales in a public manner. So, our business is conducted in public, and people are welcome to come to those meetings. I will say that this is about a 10,000% increase over our usual attendance. So, and Carol.
Carol
thank
says,
you. Hi,
speak.
Carol.
Carol says, don't forget about me.
For always being here.
Yes.
But I would just say that.
All right. All right, thank you. I've got, yes, sir.
I do have one other question I'd like to raise.
Sure, absolutely, come. And then, Ms. Leahy, are you still here? Yeah. And you want to speak, right? Yeah, me and my husband. You and your husband, absolutely. And then, where's Christian? You still want to speak, sir? All right, cool. All right, I got you guys on here. Go ahead, sir.
So, Andrew Dubin, Taylor Road, right near the wells. You've heard from my wife, you've heard from my daughter, now I think you're gonna hear the last of the Dubins. So sorry for all that. But firstly, thanks to everyone here for the incredible tireless work that's gone in. I'd like to recognize a number of people who've spoken here. Mrs. Scott for her points about process. You know, the mayor for his transparency and for admitting to my wife and myself, you know, the transgression, if you will, of a promise broken. Honorable and integrity is being shown here, so thank you all. Also, I think to Will Brain and his point about the importance of reselling water from the aqueduct and making sure that, and ensuring that we have a backup supply in adequacy. And my concern there, I'm echoing, I think, his point, perhaps a little bit more fine-tunedly, that we look at a very short period of history on what our water levels have been. But really, as we look at it, climate change, we should probably be looking at, like you do in South Florida with the floodplains, a 30-year historical and a 30-year projection outward to determine the actual backup needs. And while we may only be looking at an 8 to 10-year economic cycle before our opportunity to sell water evaporates, if you will, I think the historical perspective gives us a more grounded understanding mathematically of what we're looking at. So one. So the other key point I wish to make, and it touches a little bit on my daughters, but maybe goes a little bit further. Selling water to other communities, that's my biggest concern, because not all communities are equal, nor do they play by the same rules. And we face not an economic decision. These boards face not an economic decision solely. And everything we've discussed today has been about the economics of water sales and the transactional aspect of it. But we have, as a community, a moral decision. If we sell water to, there's only one community that really wants water, let's face it, because that's the mechanism for them to build more housing. There's 140-acre ACE farms currently been purchased that may be going into high occupancy residential buildings. In Blooming Grove, our neighboring community. If we sell water in these next 10 years, permitting that community to build those additional housing, what's the impact to our community? This is the moral decision. It's not the transactional sale of water that we're making today. It's what we're inviting into our community and our neighbors and the impact of that long term. I would ask these boards to really think about that and to weigh heavily those values and the values of our community and the life we know today. Because if you look at Blooming Grove, if you look at Washingtonville, if you look at Monroe, it's not the same community it was 15 years ago. And if you're going to sell water in the next 8 years and allow that much more growth, you're going to get more of that here. I'll leave you with that thought and that responsibility. And I know it's a heavy one, so please judge and decide for not just yourselves, but for your next generations, what community they'll have. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Ms. Leahy. If you could just state your names and residence.
Sure thing. Good evening, everyone. Brian Leahy and Deirdre Leahy, residents of 275 Otterkill. We also own a property within Cornwall proper that draws from the town water supply. So I'd say that we do have a voice here. Protocol haven't been established. Thank you to everybody for your work on this. We've recently decided to more or less plant the flag here. My wife and I are high school sweethearts. We've been here forever and a day. We've seen Cornwall since we were kids, and we've seen what it is today and potentially where it's going. A few points of clarity, if I may, and I definitely won't be able to say it as succinctly as some of the Dubins, or probably what my wife will be able to, so please indulge me. If I understand correctly, the proposal that is being discussed is we're drawing water potentially from the Catskill Aquifer to refine and sell via a connection. Aqueduct, excuse me. That's a true statement.
Yep.
Okay, so some concerns with that potentially. The reserve capacity piece is huge. If it's parity 1-to-1, what's the mission creep with that? We're talking today about X amount of gallons. What's it going to be in 5-10 years from now, especially when our neighbors to the southwest continue to build their community at a breakneck pace, we'll say. Again, have been here since I was a boy. It's changed a lot, okay? Is that discussion equitable or is that discussion equality? What are we talking about? Two very different things. So if our neighbors have 50,000 folks in that community in Curious Jewel today, and they have 80,000 tomorrow, if we're talking about equity, that's taking more water from the folks in this community. It's not parity, it's not equal in terms of that. What is the enforcement mechanism? Can we ensure that whatever agreements that are reached at our level here at local government are actually what's happening? Like what does that look like? If you're going to sell X amount of gallons, how can you ensure that that's actually going to happen? That you might have an answer for that. I don't know. I have some other things here. I won't belay them. Some of the other folks covered it. One thing I'd ask folks to consider here, the decision makers in general, the public referendum piece. we're not talking about park benches. We're not talking about whether or not to cut down the tree in Town Square there. You're talking about a limited resource that is going to get increasingly more difficult to draw from in the 21st century. As folks that are getting ready to start a family, that concerns me. This town has, and village, this community has a capability to draw water locally. Again, no pun intended, that can evaporate pretty quickly if we're selling that water in bulk to our neighbors. What I also encourage you to think in terms of mission creep, and for those that don't know the term, we're talking today versus what it's going to become. So I hear a lot about, tonight, county and state precedent / law on this. So if there's a connection and the state and the county can make something, make the community do something that maybe the public of that community is not willing to do, well, this doesn't happen, at least at the same level of frequency at county and state government. And so is that accountability going to get lost down the line if we now have a connection and now we have folks up in the county seat or the state seat dictating what the community will do? I'll leave you with that. So with the public referendum piece, if you can legally do it, I'd request you consider it. It's not a park bench. With that, I yield it to my wife, Deirdre.
Hi. I was at the last meeting and I learned a lot about aquifers since, something I didn't know too much about. As Brian said, we have a property that does require water from a well at Otter Kill Road. My concern with selling water is that it does require to tap the aquifer by that area, correct?
No.
It doesn't require to tap
This
it,
is
but
New
you-
York City water. What we would consider would be selling New York City water. It comes down the aqueduct. We tap into the aqueduct. We have that as our backup supply. And sometime 3 or 4 years ago, we used that as part of our water here. We haven't needed to. We would take water from there, buy it at a low rate, and then treat it and sell it at a premium.
Okay, so
To
that
confirm, that's what we're talking about today, correct?
But
Well-
Deirdre, you understand that the Taylor Road wells are the backup, that's what you're talking about.
I do.
So are
I do.
reservoirs.
Okay. Well, just in the event that we needed that backup and it became heavily pumped, and I'm not saying that that would happen, but if we kind of open the door up to that potential liability, maybe even for another administration 10 years from now, there is a scientific paper here, and I have a few copies just for reference, demonstrating that modern groundwater reaches deeper depths in heavily pumped aquifer systems. And the reason why that might be of some concern is that modern water, this is water that's recently been precipitated from 1953 or sooner, has been exposed to chemicals and pesticides that the water deep in an aquifer has not been. And so if you heavily pump an aquifer, you may be depleting that groundwater further into the ground, possibly draining well water for residents that are on wells, but also introducing pollutants. And I just want to make sure that the town considers this. And also, if something like that were to happen, something catastrophic, I'm not saying that it would, how would the town support residents who do rely on a well if wells became, dried up or pollutants increased? I just want to know that the town is, thinking of us as well.
Well said. That study, would you like us a copy of it? I'll make sure the village and the town get it, and I'll make sure it's entered into the minutes.
Sure.
All right? All right.
Can the committee also get that?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Doris, can we just make copies of those? Okay. Thank you both for your comments.
So this would be something potentially that we're looking at in the source of water protection plan, technical assistance that we're gonna undergo with the DEC over, what is it, the next 18 months? However long that would,
It generally
Yeah.
takes 12 to 18 months to plan, I believe, Carla. And we're very lucky having Carla on the committee as well, because her employment agency that she runs is one of the technical advisors for that program. However, she has not been assigned Cornwall. We're gonna get a different technical advisor, so she knows a lot about that, so you can probably talk a little bit more on that, maybe?
Yes, so the drinking, the DEC, the 604B program this past year decided to do a different approach. Typically, municipalities just ask to they explained that they're interested in having a drinking water source protection plan done for their community. It's not always done jointly. It's great that there's the consideration to do it jointly here because of the location of the properties. But this year they did an application basis. And so there were at least, I think, 50 municipalities statewide. And unfortunately, we did not get Cornwall on Hudson. Where I work is the Hudson Valley Regional Council. It's a regional planning organization. But it's a really great process. It's completely free to the municipalities that are interested. You're guided through this process. The only effort that really the municipalities have to provide is the stakeholder, contribute public input, make sure that it is shared with the public, and then the technical assistance provider that's going to be working with the village will draft everything, the maps. You'll get a really good, solid plan as a result. And this is all overseen by the 604B program, and it is the final plan needs to be approved by the 604B program, so it has to meet certain basic standards.
Yeah, let me just say the town's going to be very actively engaged in this. You know, even though, I mean, technically it went to COH, we have said from the get-go that, you know, we want to make sure that we're protecting our aquifers out in Mountainville, and, you know, we want to make sure that, you know, well water is protected, and we're going to look at all of this. So we're going to be very much involved.
And just a point of clarification on those programs, that doesn't mean physical security like fences and barbed wire and stuff like that. It looks at current zoning around those properties. It looks at any type of industrializations that's around there, any point of contamination and other concerns.
All right, to the Leahys, and I think it's Ms. Stovall, right? I wish, and I think my colleagues on the two boards here agree, I wish that I was your age and as erudite and well put together as you are, and to make your case and to do it effectively. So thank you for that. Very, very impressive, and I appreciate it. And we do like seeing young people getting involved in what's going on. That's exceedingly encouraging. Thank you. I will say one thing to Mr. and Ms. Leahy. One of the issues, this is three-dimensional chess. One of the issues that was of concern to me and this board, and what we thought would be a side, another thing that could be considered, was preventing other communities from buying up property near yours in a neighboring or contiguous community and drilling wells. KJ has a well right next to ours. They can put it in operation whenever they want to. That's going to impact you more than me selling New York City aqueduct water. But if we had been able to strike a deal, and I'm not suggesting there was one on the table that suggested this, where maybe we got control of that well in return for selling them water, man, I just think it's a missed opportunity. Because there are people on wells, and we are concerned about them. You're not necessarily part of our water system, but you are part of our water system. So those were some of the considerations that for a number of years this board has been grappling with, because we'd like to protect the people out in Mountainville. But it's hard to do that if I don't have any leverage. Everything, the 92 cents per 1,000 gallons, it's leverage. It's the way negotiations work, you know? Town says we'll do this, we say we'll do this, and we try to work something out. And it's the same thing with this. If we were to sell water, there were a lot of things that were under consideration, and protecting people out there on the aquifer was one of them, people on wells. All right, Christian, I think you're the last person up, sir. Dick, you got it.
Christian Brunelli. I live at 101 Angola Road. I'm also a member of the Cornwall Central School Board. And also, I should say that I share a home with someone with 3 degrees in water resources engineering, which makes her maybe one of the more knowledgeable, more credentialed people on here, and has taught 17 years of cadets about hydrology and water resources. And I must say, because she told me to say this, what I'm about to say does not reflect her opinions, and also my opinion is my personal opinion and not the opinion of the Board of Education.
Fair enough.
So I just want to start with something. You know, St. Paul in his hymn of love talked about love does not keep a record. And I'm also reminded of the story of the man who had a $20 bill in his right pocket, moved it to his left pocket, and thought he made $20. So here's what's going to happen about that $200,000. Because most of that savings is going to come, probably about 2/3 of it roughly, by a decrease in, let's say, the tax for the school district. Our tax levy is the same. We're going to just redistribute that, which means your constituents, the town's constituents, will just pay more in taxes and school taxes for what they're not paying for water. So I'm not sure, this is kind of like the $20 from one pocket and $20 in the pocket, and I'm not sure that anyone thinks that whether they're paying it for water or they're paying it in school taxes. If you raise the charges to the school will just have to raise what we charge the residents of this community, okay, to cover the increased cost that you're charging us for water, which are your constituents as well as mine, as well as all the members of the town council. The only gain you will get is by raising the school taxes on the people who don't use the water system, which are not only just the members of the school district who live in the town of Woodbury and New Windsor, but all the residents of Angola Road, Route 32, Mountainville, who basically live on wells. And so 2 weeks ago, when I had to pay a few $1,000s to replace my well pump, I don't remember getting a collection from everyone else to help me repair my water resources and infrastructure. And testing the water, fortunately, as I said, I share a home with the water resource engineer, so I get some help with that. And I remember being in this room 5 years ago, talking about the water district that was maybe proposed for Cedar, Angola, and Quaker, and being told by someone that's in this room, and I'm not going to name names, that we weren't that many and we weren't that important. And now you're going to tax us without getting any water, okay? So you're taxing all those people, the people on wells, which is a significant portion of the town of Cornwall, the members of the school district who live in Woodbury and New Windsor, to basically kind of subsidize. Now, last thing, I talked about St. Paul and a record of, keeping a record. When you applied for the exemption earlier this year from the school district on your properties, we also got a list of all the things the school district provides to the town and to the village, and what we could charge you for all those things. And basically, it was a wash. So we could go around and talk about it, and we can talk about like we're somehow warring taxing authorities, and let's say we're all going to settle our accounts, and then our constituents basically end up where they started. I'd rather just look at it in terms of love for the town, love for the village, and that we all do things for each other because we all serve the same people. So I'm not sure what you're going to gain by transferring the properties, taking off the school tax rolls. It seems like you're just, as I said at the beginning, taking a $20 bill from your right pocket, putting it in your left pocket, and thinking you made $20. And I just want to conclude with this, because really all that does, it changes the budget space from the school district and town and puts it in the hands of the village board, which among the three that we're talking about is in some ways the least representative group that's in this room tonight, where you have the most people who ran in uncontested elections or appointed, and having them making decisions with that $200,000 that we just shifted around between the different taxing authorities. And I don't see how that's fair, I don't see how that's just, and I don't see how that benefits the people of our community. Thank you.
All right, thank you. One of the things that we discussed here, Mr. Brunelli, on the village board was the notion of double taxation. So we paid school taxes, right? But then we're also getting taxed to drink a glass of water because the school system gets to receive taxes off of those properties that we process water and deliver water to you. We're delivering a service, and like my example earlier on with New Windsor, I got no problem paying into the Newburgh and Large City School District because we don't provide them anything. We deliver you 8 million gallons of water per year. You need it. We can talk about the different things. You can give us the list of things that you think we should be paying for. I had a nice conversation with Mr. Sotland today about an additional crossing guard and where that expense should come from. Is it a school expense? Is it a village expense? And we talked about it. There are a number of other communities where the school system does not tax the community that provides them water, school taxes on those properties. I just want the same. I think that's fair. You make some good points, and I know statistics, we can make them work to our best favor, but I'm being transparent about it. I'm putting it out there. You have an $82 million a year budget. 87, there you go. All right, 87 million, all right, well, it was under, I thought it was 82. 87 millions, right. Ours in the water system is 3 million. So we're doing a lot of things with a small amount of money. You see the things, the challenges we have going forward. $200,000 or $160,000 is a rounding error on an $87 million budget. It's money, it's important, but it's much more important to this small. By the way, you had people that ran unopposed on the school board. All right, well, you pointed it out about my board. I was just gonna say, you had the same thing, and there have been people appointed to the school board as well. So, 6 times, okay.
Well, you know, I would also add too that unlike the school district, we don't get, what is it, 80 cents, you know, like you guys get subsidized by the state in certain capital projects. You get, you know, state aid. I believe the state legislature gave money to the school district last year, and instead of lowering taxes, you just found a way to spend it. So I mean, there are you know, things here that are not necessarily equitable too. So I just want to point those couple of things out as well.
So these are all true things. However, we're talking about the net change, about the policies that you're proposing right now. All that money comes ultimately from the taxpayers and the people who vote in the state, in the town, in the village, in the school district. And the point is, we're talking about the change because of this IMA and what you're proposing here. And all that is doing is moving the tax, you know, redistributing the tax around. And I will just say, kind of like with like comparing our budget with your budget, as you know, Babe Ruth said when he was asked about whether getting paid more than Herbert Hoover, you know, we have more to do. And as Babe Ruth said, I had a better year.
Thank you, Mr. Brunelli. All right, is there, Mr. Randazzo wishes to speak?
Thank you, Mayor. I'll be brief. It's getting late. We're already going around the horn with all this stuff. I do want to also say that I want to recognize Mike Trainer for the great work that he has done for the village. I mean, tighten up the water system where you literally saved having to produce tens of millions of gallons of water a year. Saved everybody a lot of money. So that's a huge plus. I want to go back 50 years. My memory isn't great, but I think I remember this, and maybe Dave Carnwright and maybe one or two other people in the room are going to remember this. When the the resolution came out, June 3rd, 1974, the village board adopted the resolution, set up assessments went up in the town. We're going to raise a percentage on the water. It got me thinking. I'm saying, what would have prompted that at that time? I think I have the answer. Dave, you remember CLT? Cole Layer Trumbull. The county hired Cole Layer Trumbull to reassess all the properties in the county of Orange. And that came out around 1973, 1974. My guess is, as part of that, the water properties assessments were increased as a part of that countywide reassessment. So it didn't probably just fall on the town. It was based on agreements that the county had with all the municipalities and all. So the percentage really doesn't matter. I mean, we've heard time and time again about the $200,000 in property taxes, and I understand that. I mean, I voted against giving the exemption 26 times.
Yep.
Okay? I'm very familiar with it. But I think what troubles me at this point, because of coming up with the IMA, I thought the IMA was going to be discussed and then voted on tonight, but it was voted on before the meeting even took place. I just think after 125 years to have an IMA, put it together, a few more weeks or a few more months wouldn't have hurt anything to be able to have a deeper discussion as to a few more things that could have been included in it. But I think at this point, what my concern is that, let's say $200,000 in property taxes, the additional money that is raised from the town water users above and beyond if they were being charged a village rate is about $540,000, $550,000. That's in excess. Your taxes you're paying is $200,000. You're getting almost triple already what the property taxes really are. So when I heard that there was going to be another increase, and even though the board hadn't voted on it yet, but it was stated that you're going to have an increase, I'm saying, well, how much more are you going to do? Where's the fairness here? The town water customers don't have any representation in this whole process other than the town board, and they have no leverage other than what they have. And I think the unfortunate part, and I think this is one thing that I'm going to try to get a hold of Skoufis and Ekis, because I talked to the Public Service Commission. And basically, I think, as I remember, there are 250 private water systems in the state of New York. The PSC regulates the private water systems. So you say to yourself, why would they regulate private water systems? They don't regulate municipal water systems. Well, they regulate the private water systems because the water customers have no say. It's privately owned, they can do what they want with it, they can charge what they want with it. So the PSC has a hand in it. And I think really, and I'm not being critical of the board, I sat with you guys over the years. But I think really the fact is it's really taxation without representation. We as water customers in town, we have no representation. And I really think that the PSC should start regulating not municipal water systems that are supplying their residents, not if you're selling bulk to another community, but I think when it comes to selling to consumers, you're not selling it to the town of Cornwall, you're selling it to the water customers in the town. They have no voice. So just like a private water company, I think the PSC has to get involved with at least having some oversight on the municipal operations that have water customers outside of it. So I think, look, the only thing I'm asking here for is, and you put the increase on hold, I commend you for that. I think that more work has to be done. I understand, Mayor, if you're saying it can't be equitable, okay? It can't be parity, but it's got to be fair. It's got to be equitable. You know, we used to talk about how we're all one community, and we are. I grew up in this community. I grew up in the village for 20 years. I've lived back into the village probably 3-4 times over my adult life. And I think the bottom line is that the town and village could come together when it comes to water. It affects everyone. We desperately need it. And I think we can come up with a system that makes the rates more fair, especially when you're talking about tens of millions of dollars potentially having to invest in a system and all. So I really think that it's important that the town board and the village board really get together, iron out something where the rates become closer. If there's millions of dollars that's going to be invested, you know what? We should all be paying for it. All pay the same across the board. That's what would be fair. So I really encourage you to do that. And I think that we don't have to fight over this. I got to be honest with you. We're all adults. We all have responsibilities, elected officials. We can solve these problems together. The only thing I want to say about selling water too, when Stewart had the PFOS, right? I mean, we were nervous because we really thought that it would come down the mood and it would impact the aquifer on Taylor Road. So the only thing I'm saying is be cautious if you're going to think about selling water, because we've been blessed with 3 different great resources. We've never had droughts that we've had to deal with. So before you commit any of the water, you have to think about what happens if one of the supplies goes down. If something happens to that aquifer and you got to go back onto the aqueduct. So think about it. Bill raised some good points. So think about it all. Let's come together as a community. Let's get some, equity here in the race where we're not fighting over it. We're all working for the same goal, and that's to have good quality water for all our residents. Thank you.
Appreciate it. Well said, Mr. Randazzo. Dick, the only thing that, that's I guess that strikes me is you are saying the town and the village need to continue to work together on this. But this never happened before. This is new. You and I overlapped in office by 9 months. Do you know how many times you and I spoke about water? One time when you came down here because the town pool had been leaking for eons to see if we would charge you the village rate for the water that was leaking out of the pool, that was treated water, you were paying expensive amount for it, you were chlorinating it, and then it was leaking out of the pool. That's the only conversation we had about water. Let me just finish. That's the only conversation we had about water. This is the 5th joint meeting, right? We had 2 of them on the Kovac Cornwall EMS situation when we took that thing on, and it wasn't popular when we did it. And this is now our 2nd meeting in regards to water, joint meeting, and Josh is getting on the calendar with me to do it uptown on sewer. But this didn't happen before. I'm just putting all this out there, and that's when I say, when I look down here, I saw your votes. I pulled your votes up. So are you telling me you voted against the plus 80% for the village in 1978, 1980?
Let's go back 45 years ago.
But I get that. But I'm saying it was an 80%.
But let's go back 80. My memory maybe is a little better than CLT. But the bottom line is at the time, rates were $1, $2, 1,000.
But that was 1978, and to compare that today where it's $12 and $16.
Big difference though, 80% back then and 80% today of the village rates, it's.
$1.86 was a lot, it meant a lot more to people back in 1978 than it does in 2024.
The other thing at the mayor, and I can remember at the time, we had 3 or 4 big water users in the town.
Hmm.
And the feeling was, we can generate a lot additional revenue from the big water users that would help offset some of the expenses for all of the residential users. Bottom line, the percentage don't mean anything, okay? Look at the dollars and cents. And when you go $12, you go $16 now, and you're talking about going $17. It's not being fair.
Did you push back on Mayor Coyne when he raised the town water rates 44 cents in, were you in office in 2018, 2019?
Well, let me add to that also. With Mayor Coyne.
No, but when these issues come up, let's address
He
them.
was working with the town. What happened during Mayor Coyne's term? Him and Mike came to the town in 2020, about, I don't know, whether it was Peck Road or something, and he said, hey, we think if you'll annex that piece of property with the water facility on it into the village.
There was no property tax waiver on that. You did that at no loss to the town. I have the minutes from the town.
$60,000 reduction in taxes, Mayor.
What I'm saying is, it wasn't a hit to you guys.
Agreed to the annexation. It took place. Look at Peck's Road. I got the sheets. Mike put it together. I think
Okay.
20 to 21.
All right.
Let's.
Let's-
$60,000. So we have worked together on it, and Mayor Coyne was trying to get some balance between the rates, and that's where we're at.
Balance between the rates. I'm all for that. I wasn't in office then. But if you're changing the code, you're going against the code, and you're coming up with rates, and the village residents were increased $2.44, and the town only 44 cents in that 5-year period, is that fair? Was there a calculus that was done?
The mayor was trying to work
I
with
got
the
you.
town.
All right.
We relieved the property
Got you.
tax on that.
Okay.
And he was trying to bring some equity between the town and the village.
I apologize. I got you. I will certainly, I've had conversations with them about it. All right, are there any other matters, anybody else wish to speak from the public? No, hearing none. All right, what we will do going forward, we will commit to, since I have consensus from our board, we will commit to tabling the 92-cent rate increase. I will go visit with the Cornwall Central School District School Board, and I will discuss it when the superintendent and the assistant superintendent for business think it's appropriate to discuss this going forward also, so I can come back and report on that. And we will look to work on the sewer prospects here as soon as the town supervisor is ready on that. Are there any alibis on the town council or the village board in regards to matters discussed tonight? Josh,
What is
go
the
ahead.
time, because this is the first I'm hearing in terms of this negotiation with the sewer. I mean, we're dealing with
No,
something.
I've
because
mentioned this at
let me
meetings a
finish,
bunch of
let me
times.
finish what I'm saying. What is the timetable that we're working on? That we're working on something, we're investing millions of dollars into, right? And we bonded for a lot of improvements in our sewer system. And we're also working with the village on the water. I'm saying, what's the timetable that we're looking at in terms of coming to some sort of agreement? I just wanna see where we're going so that.
So in terms of sewer, I think it's important to understand that the only sewer district we're really just talking about the Shore Road plant.
Because we're gonna have to do some mods
Well,
to that.
so the current agreement has the village paying 2/3 of the cost to basically run the plant, including.
1/3.
Yeah, sorry, 1/3. 1/3, yeah, I wish it was 2/3.
Yeah.
Yeah, can we change it to 2/3? Yeah, so the village basically.
We'll change the 92
yeah.
cents.
Yeah, so, okay, so basically, look, the village pays 1/3 to operate the plant, right? Plus any capital improvements, et cetera. So that's what we're talking about. Tim and I, we've had some, preliminary discussions, in terms of like trying to pull the information together. We have to figure out how many, connections there are in the village, how many connections in the town. We have to look at, what are gonna be future, capital improvements. We're still trying to figure out, based on what, a new permit could be for the Shore Road plant, if that number of 10 million is gonna jump, and it could. I mean, we don't know, honestly. So there's still a lot unknown, but I would say that sometime in, sometime in April, we would look to have a joint meeting with the village on sewer.
I
Yeah,
think that's a little too soon.
well, you know what, I think,
I'm just
that-
putting it out there.
let's pull everything together in terms of what we have, right? let's pull it all together. Let's see what we have. We're not nearly talking about the same amount of infrastructure and the size of the system, of the water system. We're talking about really just the Shore Road plant. The transmission system is theirs. They're responsible for it. So it's not the same size and scope as the water system. So I don't think it should not take nearly as long to gather the information and to get into it. So yeah, maybe I'm being aggressive with April, but there's no, let's sometimes government acts really slow. Let's try to speed it up a little bit if we can.
I
But
wanna
that's
do
the
it right.
time.
I don't wanna
That's
speed it up just to speed it up.
yeah.
So no disrespect. I'm saying, when we say speed up, the public has just spoken about a process and being included.
I would like
in that. So I'm just-
to have all the information ready
Exactly,
for
I agree
sometime
with
this spring to have it. Now, hopefully, this will track with, what we're trying to do with water
That's all
rates.
Just with the comment I wanted to make.
But the other thing that you have to take into account too is that water and sewer, they're treated differently by the state. Like who pays for the services, how they get paid for, right? So only users in a district can pay for capital upgrades. So for instance, let's just take Firth Cliff Sewer District. Only the 450 ratepayers in the Firth Cliff Sewer District will be paying back the $7-8 million in bonding. Those are the only users that can actually pay that back. Whereas with water, it's a little bit different. So I mean, it's treated differently. So we're gonna have to acknowledge like the different ways that the state treats the. Yeah. Anyway.
All right, any other alibis? Thank you, everybody, for your patience. I know we went long, and I just realized parliamentary procedures, we did not open the meeting. Yep, that is on me. So I'm gonna make a motion on the village side to close the joint special meeting. May I have a second? All in favor? Aye.
Making a motion to close the town portion of the meeting. What is that?
All right.
What does that mean now that we did not?
Yes. I don't have to do any minutes for it now.
Did I misspeak? It's Cornwall today's.
Sure.
John, thank you, man. I didn't mean to put you on the spot there, man, and.
Thanks, Sean. Thanks for the dinner the other day.
I thought we kept things between the rails until the very end, but maybe it's just because I'm punch drunk and tired of the same people, but.
Took some shots. You had the response. Facts are the facts.
Yes, I will be
Are the
collecting.
facts. And I mean, and he uses words like, we're grossly, in the paper today, we're grossly overcharging the town residents. I mean, it's just, so. Yep, always is. Thank you, town board. Madam Town Clerk, make sure you take some of that soda bread home. We're pushing it hard.
I'll take it all.
We're pushing it hard. Because the longer it sits there, the more stale it gets. All right, bud. I'm going to wait and try to herd everybody out of here. I know. I'll leave that with you, just so you have that. All right? I'm talking about the... All right. I don't know where the contract is. You got to. We knew that. First thing to ourselves, we'll never get out of a contract. You can't beat them anymore. You can't beat them. I went to the hearings out there. I saw the lady cry who ran out of water at the Grange. I was